Lauren Chen stood in line at the Elmwood Cafe on a brisk morning in downtown Boston, barely able to keep her eyes open. Her last 2 shifts as a paramedic had blended into each other, and she was only here because she'd promised herself 5 minutes of peace before tackling the third. At 34, Lauren was no stranger to exhaustion, yet something about that day weighed more heavily than usual. She rubbed her temples, thinking about her father's medical bills piling on the kitchen table at home. George Chen, her father, was 70 and battling an advanced form of cancer that demanded countless treatments not fully covered by insurance. Since Lauren's mother had passed away when she was just a teenager, it had always been the 2 of them looking out for each other. She was determined to do whatever it took to keep his spirits high and ensure he got the best care possible. The stress of balancing multiple shifts with mounting expenses sometimes felt suffocating, but she couldn't let him see her worry. The line moved slowly, filled with professionals scrolling on phones and college students skimming textbooks. Lauren glanced at the time on her phone, noting that her shift at the nearby fire station would start in 20 minutes. She tapped her foot, silently urging the barista to hurry, though she reminded herself it wasn't their fault she'd cut it so close. She had become too accustomed to racing the clock. Finally, coffee in hand, she took a seat near the window to check her messages. She had a missed call from the hospital treating her father. Her stomach tightened. A call from them was rarely good news. Before she could return it, she heard a sharp gasp from the table behind her. She turned to see an older man, perhaps mid-60s, wearing a tailored charcoal suit, sitting with his back stiff against the chair. His face was pale, and he pressed a trembling hand to his chest. Lauren set her cup down and rose immediately, propelled by 12 years of paramedic instinct. Approaching him gently, she spoke in a calm but urgent tone. "Sir, are you feeling any pain?" He nodded, sweat forming on his brow. "Chest tight," he murmured, struggling to speak. His eyes betrayed both pain and alarm. The few patrons around them began to notice, some standing up, uncertain how to help. Lauren crouched beside the man's chair, swiftly checking his pulse and noticing the clamminess of his skin. She recognized the telltale signs of a potential heart attack. "Someone call 911, she ordered, though she was already reaching for her phone. Another customer fumbled with theirs, and within seconds the call was placed. Meanwhile, Lauren assessed his breathing, told him to stay calm, and reassured him that help was on the way. "Try to stay as still as you can," she said, keeping her voice firm yet comforting. He locked eyes with her, and she could see a flicker of trust beneath the fear. A crowd gathered, but Lauren blocked them out to focus on the man. With practiced movements, she loosened his tie and asked a nearby employee to bring water. Seconds felt like hours, but every piece of training she had took over her thoughts. Soon, the wail of an approaching ambulance echoed through the busy street. When the paramedics arrived, Lauren provided a concise handoff, estimated time of onset, his current symptoms, and the steps she'd taken. They recognized her from her own station, one of the perks of a close-knit emergency response community. Nodding gratefully, they helped him onto a stretcher, and Lauren offered a supportive squeeze of his hand before stepping back. A wave of relief, mingled with adrenaline, surged through her. The cafe patrons began to clap and murmur praises, but Lauren felt a flush of embarrassment. She was used to helping people in dire situations, yet seldom in such a public setting off-duty. She glanced around for her cup of coffee, but it had been knocked over in the commotion. That minor loss seemed trivial, though, compared to what had just happened. One of the paramedics turned and said, "Lauren, thanks for the quick response. You probably saved his life, you know." She offered a tight smile, trying to steady her own breathing. "Just doing what we do," she replied, feeling the familiar weight of humility. She spotted the older man's eyes on her as he was lifted into the ambulance. a look of profound gratitude etched into his expression. She tried to give him a reassuring nod in return. Her heart still pounded, and her hands shook ever so slightly from the rush of it all. As she watched the ambulance pull away, she wondered who that man was and whether he'd make a full recovery. Part of her wanted to follow them to the hospital, but she knew she had her own shift to start. There was no time to catch her breath. Lauren left the cafe with a new sense of urgency, never suspecting how drastically this encounter would shape her life. Lauren arrived at the fire station just as her shift was about to begin, her mind still on the incident at the cafe. She tried to focus on the briefing from her captain, Alan Hughes, but images of the older man's ashen face intruded. Alan, with his square jaw and perpetually stern expression, picked up on her distraction. "You all right, Chen?" he asked, arms crossed. The grey in his hair betrayed decades of experience in the field, and his voice held that paternal gruffness she had come to respect. "I'm fine," she managed, but couldn't hide the slight tremor in her voice. "Had a situation earlier. An older gentleman nearly had a heart attack. I was off duty, but I stepped in until the ambulance arrived." Alan's brow furrowed. "Sounds intense. You did what you had to do." Lauren nodded. "Yeah, but it was different. Seeing it happen in a place like that, usually I'm in uniform with a partner by my side, an ambulance at the ready." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're a professional, Chen. You handled it." A few of her colleagues, including Michelle Davis, her best friend on the team, approached. Michelle was younger by 5 years, with an infectious laugh and a bright energy that contrasted with Lauren's more reserved demeanor. She wore her hair in a short ponytail and had a crisp uniform that always seemed freshly pressed. "Hey, I heard about the rescue at the Elmwood. A friend sent me a video someone recorded on their phone." "You look pretty heroic, aside from that coffee stain on your shirt." Lauren felt her cheeks warm. "Great, I'm going viral for all the wrong reasons." Michelle chuckled. "Relax. You were awesome, and the coffee stain's barely noticeable." Then her smile softened. "You sure you're okay?" Lauren glanced at the clock on the wall. "I will be. Let's just get to work." The rest of the briefing passed uneventfully, with the usual reminders about equipment checks and updates on local construction that might delay ambulance routes. Lauren tried to push the cafe incident to the back of her mind, focusing instead on the job at hand. Yet every time she pictured the man's expression, she felt a jolt of concern. Midway through the shift, they received a call about a motor vehicle accident on a busy intersection. Adrenaline surged, and Lauren and Michelle hopped into the ambulance. The siren cut through the city's bustle as they wove between lanes. Arriving at the scene, they found 2 cars crumpled, though fortunately most injuries were minor. A shaken passenger complaining of whiplash, a driver with a possible sprained wrist. As Lauren tended to a young mother holding her toddler, she felt a momentary pang. The child's wide eyes reminded her of the responsibility inherent in her work. Though the crisis was mild compared to many she had witnessed, she knew any incident could turn dire if handled poorly. By the time they finished and returned to the station, the day had settled into its usual rhythm of calls and routine checks, but the quiet that followed gave Lauren room for reflection. She found herself pacing near the break room, looking at her phone, tempted to call the hospital that had likely taken the man from the cafe. Michelle entered, sipping from a water bottle. "You thinking about him again?" Lauren shrugged. "I can't help it. I wonder if he pulled through. He looked so vulnerable." "Why not check?" Michelle suggested. "I know it's not standard procedure to follow up on every off-duty situation, but it wouldn't hurt to call the hospital anonymously, right?" Lauren weighed the idea. Part of her was afraid of what she might learn. If he hadn't made it, would she feel guilty? If he had, would that lift a weight off her shoulders? Eventually, she dialed the general line of City View Medical Center. She identified herself briefly as a paramedic who assisted a patient with chest pain and asked for an update. After several minutes on hold, the receptionist came back to confirm that the patient was stable, though still under observation. The receptionist couldn't release his identity, of course, but assured Lauren that he was recovering. A wave of relief washed over her. With a heartfelt "thank you," she hung up. Something told her there was more to the situation than she realized. The receptionist had sounded almost guarded, as if the hospital staff was particularly watchful of this patient. Returning to the main hall, Lauren found Michelle. "He's okay," she said, letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "That's good," Michelle replied, giving her a quick hug. "Now you can focus on everything else going on in your life, including your dad's next appointment." Lauren pressed her lips together, that familiar worry resurfacing. She nodded, hoping life would settle back into predictable patterns. But a small voice in her head whispered that this was only the beginning, that what happened in the cafe had unleashed a series of changes beyond her control. Late that night, Lauren trudged up the worn steps to her modest apartment, every muscle aching from the day's calls. She lived in a quiet complex south of downtown Boston, mostly occupied by fellow shift workers and young families. The hallway light flickered, reminding her she had to submit a maintenance request, one more item on a long to-do list. Inside her one-bedroom unit, she dropped her keys on the kitchen counter, next to a stack of unpaid bills and a note she'd scribbled about her father's next oncologist visit. The meager lamp cast a soft glow, highlighting the worry etched into her face. She'd been working extra shifts for months now, but the medical bills kept stacking higher. After a quick microwave dinner, Lauren settled at the small dining table that doubled as her desk. She pulled out her laptop and opened a spreadsheet tracking donations and contacts for the community project she'd been developing. For the past year, in her scarce free time, she had tried to organize first aid workshops in some of Boston's underserved neighborhoods. The idea was simple: teach everyday people to perform CPR, treat wounds, and respond to emergencies until professional help arrived. Despite her passion for it, the project struggled to gain traction. She'd managed a few small events, but attendance was sporadic. She lacked the funds and time to market it properly. Sometimes she felt foolish for believing she could expand this initiative while juggling her own financial hardships and her dad's health crisis. Her phone buzzed, startling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Michelle, a supportive friend through thick and thin. "Don't forget we're on shift again tomorrow at 6 a.m. Also, how's your dad?" Lauren typed back a quick response. "He's hanging in there. Another chemo round next week." "I'm worried, but we'll make it," Michelle replied almost immediately. "You always do. Get some rest." Closing her laptop, Lauren rubbed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring yet another shift, more unpredictability. She yearned for stability, for a life where she could focus on her father's health and still have time to breathe. Instead, she wrestled with late bills, perpetual fatigue, and a nagging feeling that something in her life needed to change. She decided to call her dad before turning in. He answered on the second ring, his voice faint but comforting. "Lauren, you still awake?" She could hear the hum of the hospital ward in the background. "I just got home, Dad. How are you feeling?" "About as good as one can feel after 8 hours of chemotherapy," he replied, a slight humor in his tone. Even in the toughest moments, George Chen tried to lighten the mood. "I got your text about today's rescue." "Word travels fast around here, especially when someone saves a life off the clock," Lauren exhaled. "It was just reflex. The guy needed help, and I happened to be there." Her father paused, a gentle warmth in his voice. "I'm proud of you, kiddo. I know you worry about me, but don't forget you have your own dreams, too." This made her eyes sting. Dad, let's focus on getting you better, okay? That's my priority. They talked briefly about his upcoming scans, the possibility of changing medications. When the call ended, Lauren felt both relief and a heavy sense of responsibility. She shuffled to her bedroom, telling herself she had to sleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She thought back to that morning, the stranger in the cafe, the abrupt surge of adrenaline, the quiet gratitude in his eyes as paramedics wheeled him away. The hospital operator's tone still lingered, as if there was more they hadn't said. Lauren caught herself wishing she could check on him again, but she pushed the thought aside. She had her own avalanche of issues, no time for curiosity about some wealthy executive she'd never see again. And yet, a flicker of possibility danced on the edges of her tired mind. She half dreamed about a world where her community training project received proper funding. How many more lives could be saved if ordinary people knew simple life-saving techniques? How many families would be spared tragedy if basic first aid skills were widespread? Eventually, she fell asleep, still in her clothes, drifting into restless dreams of sirens and medical bills. Through it all, she clutched at the small spark of hope that had gotten her this far. It was the same hope that had pushed her to become a paramedic, that had driven her to stand by her father's side in his long battle, and that now whispered she could make a bigger difference if only she dared step beyond her comfort zone. Lauren's alarm blared at 4:45 a.m., dragging her from a shallow sleep. She forced herself upright and groaned, her mind still foggy. Within 30 minutes, she was out the door, coffee in hand, heading to the station under a sky barely touched by the first hint of dawn. The day began with a series of routine calls, helping an elderly woman with chronic breathing issues, assisting at the scene of a minor fire in a cramped apartment. Each incident reinforced how desperately communities needed basic medical knowledge. At the fire scene, she met a volunteer from a small non-profit who recognized her from one of the local workshops she'd conducted months ago. He thanked her for teaching him how to treat burns properly, a skill he used to help a neighbor while waiting for emergency services. Later, back at the station, Lauren found herself thinking about how many more people could benefit from the training she wanted to expand. She sat in the cramped break room, reorganizing a stack of papers related to that project, scanning the meager budget she'd scraped together. Michelle plopped down opposite her, sipping from a can of soda. "So, the workshop idea is still alive, huh?" Michelle asked, nodding at the papers. "You know, the guys around here respect what you're trying to do, but they worry you're burning yourself out." Lauren let out a shaky laugh. "I'm running on fumes, not gonna lie. But I keep thinking how important it is. These neighborhoods lack so many resources. If a child chokes or someone has a seizure, a little training can save a life." Michelle tapped the table thoughtfully. "I admire your dedication. But you've got your dad to think about, plus these endless shifts to pay off those bills. I just don't want you to collapse under all this." Before Lauren could respond, Captain Hughes entered, holding a clipboard. "Chen Davis, we got a call at City View Medical Center. They need backup transport for a cardiac patient. Let's move." Lauren's pulse quickened. City View was the same hospital where the man from the cafe had been taken. She and Michelle rushed to the ambulance, the drive a quick 15 minutes through light mid-morning traffic. At the hospital's loading bay, a nurse guided them to a patient in a wheelchair, an older woman with congestive heart failure who needed to be transferred to a rehab facility. Once they had her secured, Lauren glanced around, noticing the bustle of staff. She couldn't help but wonder if the man she'd saved was still here. She caught a glimpse of a sign directing visitors to the VIP ward on the second floor, something she'd never noticed before. A small voice in her head told her not to pry, but a stronger curiosity tugged at her. She shook off the thought, focusing on the patient. The woman was chatty, peppering Lauren with questions about life as a paramedic. Lauren responded politely. but her mind occasionally drifted, imagining the hush of the VIP ward. After the transfer, she stepped outside to find Michelle talking to a hospital administrator about a new protocol. Alone for a moment, Lauren fought an internal debate. Was it right to walk up to that floor and ask about a man whose name she didn't even know? Part of her argued it was none of her business, but a growing part whispered that maybe there was a reason their paths had crossed. She glanced at her watch. Captain Hughes would expect them back soon. She made her choice. Telling Michelle she'd meet her by the ambulance, Lauren headed to the elevator. On the second floor, the hall was quieter, the floors polished to a high sheen, and the chairs more luxurious than the usual hospital fare. She stepped up to the receptionist, who regarded her suspiciously. "Can I help you, miss?" the woman asked, her tone polite but guarded. Lauren hesitated. I'm looking for a man who was admitted after a heart-related incident about 2 days ago. I'm his paramedic. Well, I helped him at a cafe. The receptionist's expression didn't soften. I'm sorry, but VIP patient information is confidential. I'm not permitted to... Suddenly, a doctor in a white coat appeared behind the desk. He glanced at Lauren's uniform and recognized the insignia. Were you the one who gave initial care in that coffee shop? I remember hearing about that. The patient's stable, though I can't share details. He did mention wanting to meet the paramedic who saved him, but right now, he's resting. Perhaps check back later. Lauren felt her chest tighten, an odd mix of relief and longing, to see for herself that he was indeed okay. Thank you, doctor. That's all I needed to know. She left the ward and rejoined Michelle in the ambulance bay, feeling strangely conflicted. While part of her felt satisfaction that he was improving, she also felt a growing sense of moral responsibility, like she was involved in something bigger than she'd anticipated. It was unsettling, and she had no clue what it might mean for her future. That evening, Lauren finished her shift and drove straight to Cityview Hospital, telling no one. She felt a gnawing urge to find closure. The receptionist on the VIP floor seemed to recall their earlier exchange, but she didn't try to stop Lauren this time. Perhaps the hush of the late hour relaxed the usual strictness. When she reached the corridor lined with private suites, she paused, heart pounding. Her uniform jacket suddenly felt too warm. She saw a few medical staff passing by quietly, each giving her a polite nod. It felt foreign to be here off-duty. Summoning courage, she approached the door the doctor had indicated earlier. It was ajar, and she caught a glimpse of a man sitting in a recliner by the window, an IV line running into his arm. He had silver hair, neatly combed, and a stately posture that contradicted the hospital gown. Despite looking tired, he radiated a certain gravitas. Lauren gently knocked on the doorframe. The man turned his head, and for an instant, she saw recognition flash in his eyes. "Come in," he said, voice soft but resolute. "Are you the paramedic from the cafe?" She stepped into the room, nodding. "Lauren Chen, I'm sorry to intrude. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." Her words felt clumsy, but the man offered a faint smile. "I'm Robert Callahan," he said, adjusting his blanket, "and I believe I owe you my life." Lauren wasn't used to such blunt gratitude, and it momentarily threw her off balance. "It was just what any paramedic would do," she managed, "but I'm glad to see you're recovering." Robert studied her, a curious intensity in his gaze. "I doubt any paramedic would have been there at that exact moment. You were off duty, weren't you?" She nodded, recounting how she had been grabbing a quick coffee before her shift. He listened intently, occasionally closing his eyes as if the conversation tired him. She noticed a few machines by the bed monitoring his vital signs, revealing that he wasn't out of danger yet. After a brief pause, he spoke again. "I'm not supposed to have visitors for too long, but I'd like to continue this conversation when I'm better." His tone was both polite and firm. There's something about your quick action and the way you handled the situation that intrigues me." A nurse appeared, gently reminding Robert he needed rest. Lauren took that as her cue to leave. As she headed for the door, he stopped her with a final statement. "Thank you, Miss Chen. Truly." Her thoughts swirled as she made her way back down the hallway. Who was this Robert Callahan? His manner suggested he was someone important, yet he spoke to her with a directness that disarmed her. Had her intervention really been so crucial? Later that night, she recounted the visit to Michelle, who was at her apartment for a quick dinner. Michelle nearly dropped her fork. "Robert Callahan? The Robert Callahan? The guy who's on those business magazine covers and rumored to be some kind of billionaire investor?" Lauren's eyes widened. "I honestly don't follow that world. Are you sure it's the same person?" Michelle whipped out her phone, showing Lauren a quick search result. Indeed, there was Robert Callahan's photo on a financial site, describing him as a powerhouse in the pharmaceutical industry, known for turning failing companies into market giants. Lauren sank back into her seat, the weight of the revelation pressing down. "I had no idea," she murmured. "He looked so normal, just another patient in a hospital room." Michelle leaned forward, voice hushed. "If he's interested in talking to you again, it could be a big deal. But be careful. Who knows what that might entail?" Lauren stared at the pictures on Michelle's phone, her mind spinning. Could this wealthy magnate have any real interest in a paramedic's life? Was it just gratitude, or did he have some hidden motive? She couldn't decide if she felt excited, worried, or both. She recalled his final words, how he seemed intrigued by her approach in that emergency. A tiny thrill sparked inside her, mingled with apprehension. Up until now, her life had been so narrowly focused on work and her father's health. A man of such status inviting her for another conversation might lead to opportunities she'd never imagined, or complications she couldn't foresee. With that lingering thought, Lauren realized she was standing at the edge of something new, even if she wasn't ready to admit it. She'd spent so long trying to maintain order in her life, hesitant to reach beyond her familiar routines. Yet this chance encounter urged her to consider a different path, and for the first time in a while, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was room for change in her carefully circumscribed world. In the days following her quiet visit to Robert Callahan's hospital room, Lauren felt a strange mixture of apprehension and anticipation. She worked her usual shifts, responding to emergency calls and comforting distressed patients, yet her thoughts often wandered back to that hushed corridor on the VIP floor and the intriguing man who now knew her name. She kept replaying his calm gratitude, his unwavering gaze, and especially the promise of further conversation once he recovered. One evening, she was organizing the small training materials she used for her community workshops, a tattered CPR dummy, pamphlets about wound care, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway, half expecting a telemarketer. Instead, a warm but professional voice greeted her. "Miss Chen, this is Caroline Walsh. I'm Mr. Callahan's personal assistant." Lauren's grip on the phone tightened. "Yes, this is Lauren." "Is he all right?" "He's doing well. He specifically asked me to reach out to you," Caroline said. "He'd like to meet as soon as he's discharged. Perhaps tomorrow morning. If that's possible, we can arrange for a car to pick you up." Lauren hesitated. She had a shift starting at noon, but morning was free. "I think I can manage that," she replied, her heart pounding. "Where should I go?" Caroline explained that Robert had a private residence just outside of Boston, a place he preferred for quieter meetings when he wasn't at his main office. Before ending the call, she gave Lauren the address and confirmed an 8 a.m. appointment. That night, Lauren hardly slept. Questions swirled in her mind. Why did a billionaire businessman want to see her? Was this an elaborate gesture of thanks, or something else entirely? She could scarcely believe that a routine moment of off-duty heroism had spiraled into a meeting with one of the most influential figures in the pharmaceutical world. The next morning, a sleek, black sedan pulled up in front of her modest apartment building. Lauren felt self-conscious stepping outside in her best casual attire, a simple blouse, dark slacks, and flats polished to look as presentable as possible. She was more accustomed to wearing her paramedic uniform or jeans and t-shirts when off-duty. The driver, polite and discreet, opened the door for her. During the ride, Lauren stared at the passing cityscape. As they left the familiar streets of central Boston, she wondered how people like Robert lived. Within 20 minutes, the car turned down a winding drive lined with tall trees, eventually revealing a stately, ivy-covered brick home perched on a gentle hill. Caroline, dressed in a crisp navy suit, greeted Lauren at the entryway. She led her through a foyer filled with tasteful art, down a hallway that ended in a sunlit study. There, seated by a wide bay window, was Robert Callahan. He wore a comfortable sweater instead of a hospital gown, and though still pale, he seemed stronger than during their last meeting. He offered a small smile as Lauren approached. "Miss Chen," he said, gesturing to a nearby armchair. "I'm glad you could come." Lauren sat, trying to quell her nerves. "I'm glad you're feeling better. You look much improved, sir." Robert chuckled softly, waving away the formality. "Please, call me Robert. I owe my life to you after all. No need for sir." He paused, pressing a hand briefly to his chest, as if confirming his own stability. "I won't lie. The doctors say I need to take it easy for a while. But I'm on the mend." She nodded, offering a tight smile, unsure how to respond. Silence lingered for a moment until he cleared his throat. "I heard you're quite the dedicated paramedic. 12 years of experience, correct?" "Yes," Lauren confirmed. "I love the work. It's fast-paced and demanding, but helping people feels meaningful." His eyes gleamed with interest. "And you also have a side project, teaching first aid workshops in underserved neighborhoods." When she nodded, he continued. "Caroline did a bit of research. I'm intrigued by the concept. Most initiatives focus on top-tier medical facilities, but you're targeting basic life-saving skills at a grassroots level." Lauren shifted, unsure whether to be flattered or intimidated that he'd investigated. "I don't have many resources, so it's small scale. But I believe if more people knew simple techniques, CPR, how to treat cuts or burns, we'd lose fewer lives waiting for ambulances." Robert listened intently, drumming his fingers on the armrest. "This is precisely why I asked you here. I have a philanthropic foundation that supports various healthcare projects, though most are aligned with large hospitals or research centers. Lately, I've been wondering if our approach is too narrow." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "Meeting you might be the sign I needed." Lauren swallowed hard, hardly daring to breathe. She sensed that an extraordinary proposition lay just beyond the conversation's edge. Part of her felt excited, part of her deeply uncertain. She clutched the arms of the chair, waiting. Robert continued, "Once I'm fully recovered, I'd like to explore the idea of expanding your workshops on a national scale. We could integrate them into my foundation's efforts, scaling your methods with proper funding and resources. And of course, that would require someone with real experience in the field, someone like you." His words hung in the air, resonating in Lauren's chest. She had never considered the possibility that her modest initiative could reach beyond Boston. But the thought of stepping into such a large project, especially within a world of corporate philanthropies, both thrilled and terrified her. She nodded slowly, the spark of possibility igniting a subtle glow in her eyes. As Robert watched with a mixture of confidence and keen anticipation, Lauren lingered in Robert's study, grappling with the magnitude of his proposal. He spoke earnestly of his foundation, describing its historical focus on big-ticket medical research grants, prestigious hospital wings, and advanced technology initiatives. In his view, a grassroots training program was uncharted territory, but possibly the missing piece of a larger puzzle. While he explained this, Lauren found herself wrestling with conflicting emotions, excitement at the prospect of real support and fear of stepping outside her comfort zone. Caroline brought in tea, setting a delicate porcelain cup in front of Lauren, who thanked her quietly. The warm beverage soothed her nerves, but only slightly. Robert continued outlining the general idea. We'd begin by conducting pilot workshops in major cities, refining the curriculum and gathering data to convince stakeholders, board members, donors that first aid training can save lives and reduce healthcare costs. Save lives and reduce costs, Lauren repeated, letting the phrase sink in. It sounded so official. How do you think the Foundation's board would feel about a shift like this? A wry grin tugged at Robert's lips. That's where it gets tricky. Many on my board favor high-profile partnerships with prestigious institutions. They might see your program as too grassroots for their liking. But if we present it well, demonstrate tangible results, I believe we can sway enough votes to fund it. Lauren glanced around the study, noting shelves filled with medical texts, business journals, and family photographs. A particular portrait caught her eye, Robert, younger and full of ambition, alongside an older man who resembled him. She realized how little she knew about the personal side of this billionaire who was now asking her to collaborate. He followed her gaze, then said softly, "That's my father. He passed years ago, but he was the reason I got into healthcare. He ran a small-town pharmacy. I saw firsthand how simple knowledge and resources could change lives." Lauren offered a small, understanding nod. A sudden empathy welled up inside her. He might be a billionaire, but he had once stood behind a humble pharmacy counter, watching his father serve the community. Their backgrounds weren't as divergent as she'd assumed. The meeting ended with an agreement to talk more once Robert had cleared his final medical tests. On her way out, Lauren felt a sense of awe. The air outside was crisp, and as she climbed back into the sleek sedan, she glanced over her shoulder at the stately residence, wondering if her life would pivot in ways she had never anticipated. Back home, that sense of awe lingered. She paced her small living room, replaying the conversation in her mind. The phone buzzed, Michelle calling. "I need the full rundown," her friend demanded, after Lauren answered. Lauren tried to compress the meeting's highlights into a concise explanation. Michelle squealed through the line, "This is huge, but how are you feeling about it?" "Conflicted," Lauren admitted. "If I do this, I might need to cut back on shifts. Could I afford that? Then there's Dad's treatment. The bills won't vanish overnight." "I get it," Michelle said gently. "But if you're serious, maybe talk to Dad, see what he thinks. Also, maybe your captain. He might give you some schedule flexibility." Lauren nodded to herself. "Yeah, good idea." The next morning, she stopped by the fire station before her shift. She found Captain Hughes in his office, scanning paperwork. He glanced up, removing his reading glasses. "Chen, didn't expect you in early." She took a seat and explained, somewhat hesitantly, about Robert's offer. Though she kept details modest, the gist of it was that she might need to scale back her hours or eventually leave altogether. Captain Hughes rested his elbows on the desk, his lined face thoughtful. "You've been a solid paramedic, and I hate to lose a good one, but this sounds like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Honestly, if you can bring better emergency training to the public, you'll still be serving the cause, just on a different scale." She felt a knot in her throat. She had spent over a decade in these halls, forging friendships and confronting life-or-death situations alongside these people. Walking away, even partially, wasn't easy. But the captain's words offered a sense of relief. Later that day, Lauren visited her father at the hospital. He was midway through another round of chemotherapy, resting with a worn but determined expression. George lifted his head as she approached, managing a faint smile. She relayed the possibility of leading a larger program, wincing at how grand it all sounded. Her father patted her hand. "I've always told you, aim high. Don't let my health hold you back. I want to see you accomplish everything you're meant to do." His voice was shaky, but his conviction shone through. That evening, Lauren left the hospital, feeling as though she was standing at the edge of a cliff. The life she'd always known was behind her, steady, familiar, contained. In front lay an uncharted path, and though she felt fear, she also sensed a deep calling to go forward. The old routine, worn uniforms, daily emergency calls, overshadowing debts, beckoned her to stay, but Robert's proposition promised another route, one where she could reshape how communities handle emergencies. She didn't yet know which way she'd choose. But she recognized that whatever she decided, it would mean saying farewell, at least symbolically, to the comfortable predictability she had clung to for so long. 2 weeks passed, each day carrying a spark of new possibilities. Robert had been cleared by his doctors to resume limited work, and Lauren found herself invited to a luncheon meeting at the Callahan Foundation's downtown office. The building, sleek and glass-walled, contrasted sharply with the fire station's worn bricks she was accustomed to. She arrived in her trusty sedan, feeling underdressed in simple slacks and a tailored blazer borrowed from Michelle. The lobby itself was an architectural marvel, all shimmering floors and sunlight bouncing off polished surfaces. She tried to quell her nerves by reminding herself that she belonged here. Robert had requested her presence. A reception desk, staffed by 2 impeccably dressed attendants, greeted her. After checking in, they pointed her toward the elevator that led to the Foundation's main conference suite. Lauren navigated the corridors, taking in the meticulously curated paintings and subtle corporate branding that exuded wealth and prestige. When she stepped into the meeting room, she found Robert seated at a long table with several individuals. Caroline, of course, but also 2 other key Foundation members. Oliver Barnes, the head of strategic initiatives, wore an expression of mild skepticism, and Catherine Moore, from public relations, sported a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Robert rose to greet her warmly, introducing her to the team. "Lauren, I'm glad you could make it. This is an informal discussion to float some ideas before we decide on a formal presentation." Oliver gave a curt nod, looking her over. "I hear you're a paramedic with a grassroots approach to first aid training. Robert seems quite enthusiastic about it." Lauren tried not to let his tone rattle her. "Yes, I've been organizing small workshops in community centers. The goal is to empower individuals with basic life-saving skills." Catherine gestured for her to sit. "It's a noble goal, and I can see the PR value in a foundation project that touches lives directly." Lauren cleared her throat, carefully choosing her words. "I'm not focused on PR value. I'm focused on actual outcomes. With the right funding, we can train people in neighborhoods that rarely receive attention. We can reduce preventable deaths while waiting for ambulances, especially in lower-income areas." Robert offered her an encouraging nod, then looked at Oliver. "Let's hear her out fully before we decide anything." With that, Lauren began a more detailed explanation, speaking about the successes and failures she'd encountered in her pilot programs. She described how a father had saved his daughter from choking after attending just one of her short demonstrations. She recounted how a church basement event had led to 20 new trainees who, in turn, taught others in their families. Oliver frowned slightly. "While I appreciate the anecdotes, We usually deal in data, charts, metrics, cost-benefit analyses. I understand, Lauren responded, trying to maintain confidence. But part of the challenge is that my grassroots efforts haven't had the infrastructure to collect extensive data. That's where the Foundation's resources could make a difference. Catherine interjected. If we're to sell this internally, especially to potential donors, we'll need a clear strategy. Launching a large-scale program in multiple cities requires solid planning, marketing, and, of course, financial projections. Robert leaned forward, addressing the group. Which is why we're here to brainstorm. Lauren has hands-on expertise. With proper guidance from people like Oliver and Catherine, we can craft a compelling proposal. The question is whether we're all willing to deviate from the typical research-focused grants and invest in direct community engagement. A silence followed. Caroline, who had been quietly taking notes, finally spoke up. I believe we can find a balance. Our Foundation's mission statement does reference increasing medical accessibility. Community training could be the perfect demonstration of that promise. Lauren watched Oliver's skeptical expression soften, though he still appeared cautious. As they continued discussing logistics, her initial intimidation began to fade. She sensed a cautious openness from the team. They questioned her thoroughly, but it felt like they were probing for clarity rather than trying to dismiss her outright. After nearly 2 hours, the group took a pause. Catherine rose, smoothing her tailored jacket. I'll work with Robert and Caroline on some data frameworks. Oliver, maybe you can help Lauren with a cost structure. We need to see how many trainers we'd need, how many sessions per month, that sort of detail. Oliver inclined his head in agreement, though not without reservation. Yes, let's start small. A pilot program in 1 or 2 cities. That should provide enough data to justify further expansion if it works. Lauren left the meeting feeling both exhilarated and overwhelmed. The Foundation's office lobby seemed even more imposing on her way out, but she walked with a fresh resolve. She'd taken her first steps into this special world, a place of polished floors and endless spreadsheets, where she'd have to prove that simple skills could save lives in grand, measurable ways. Driving away, she realized how far she'd come from the battered ambulance and the tight-knit fire station. She felt a pang of homesickness for the familiarity of sirens and uniforms, yet beneath that, a quiet thrill coursed through her. She was entering uncharted territory, and while the stakes felt immense, she couldn't deny the pull of possibility lighting her path. Lauren found herself increasingly split between 2 worlds. By day, she donned her paramedic uniform, responding to the city's ever-present emergencies. By late afternoon, she slipped into business casual attire, heading to the Callahan Foundation's offices or virtual planning sessions. It was exhausting, yet oddly invigorating. Oliver, despite his initial skepticism, began sharing spreadsheets and budget templates with her. He insisted on thorough calculations, projected training session costs, potential travel expenses, staff salaries if the program scaled. She struggled at first, not used to corporate jargon and high-level planning, but step by step she learned to estimate expenses for renting community spaces, purchasing training materials, and marketing the workshops. Catherine coached her on crafting compelling narratives that might resonate with donors. One evening, they met in a nearby cafe, away from the formal atmosphere of the office. Over steaming cups of chamomile tea, Catherine encouraged Lauren to refine the way she told success stories. It's not just about telling them a child got saved from choking, Catherine explained in her polite, measured way. Donors and board members need to see the bigger impact, how each workshop builds a network of trained individuals who can respond to emergencies, amplifying the effect over time. Lauren sipped her tea, nodding. I appreciate that. But I never want to lose the human element. That's what keeps me going." Catherine's expression softened. "And that's precisely why you're the best face for this initiative. Trust me, staying authentic is part of what will make your proposal stand out." Back at the fire station, Michelle noticed Lauren's new preoccupation. She found her friend hunched over a laptop between calls, immersed in financial models instead of medical charts. "You're turning into quite the businesswoman," Michelle teased, sliding onto the bench beside her. Lauren rolled her eyes with a faint grin. "I wouldn't say that. I still can't get half these terms straight. It's like learning a new language. The other day, Oliver mentioned ROI, and I had to Google it on my phone under the table." Michelle laughed. "Return on investment. So how's your investment returning so far?" "It's complicated," Lauren admitted. "I believe in what we're doing, but there's a lot of pushback. Some board members just don't see how first aid training can be as impactful as building another research center or funding expensive hospital tech." Michelle reached for a leftover bag of chips on the table. "They might be in for a surprise once you show them how everyday skills can save lives on a massive scale. And hey, how's your dad coping with all this change in your schedule?" Lauren's gaze flickered. "He's proud, a bit worried about me burning out, but he says I'm on the right path. Still, whenever I see him hooked up to those IV drips, I'm reminded why I need this to succeed. I want a more sustainable way to pay for his treatments. Working endless paramedic shifts isn't enough." Their conversation was cut short by the alarm bell signaling another emergency call. Lauren shut her laptop and raced alongside Michelle to the ambulance. Even while loading gear, her mind was split, half on the immediate rescue at hand, half on the long-term goal she was fighting for. That evening, after the chaos of the day's calls, she drove to her modest apartment, noticing with a pang of regret how little time she had spent there lately. The living room table was strewn with documents from the foundation, and her father's medical bills piled on a nearby counter. She sighed, flipping through the hospital statements before grabbing her phone. She had an email from Caroline marked urgent. Opening it, Lauren found a note suggesting they schedule a major presentation for the Foundation's board within the next 2 weeks. The board wanted to see a formal proposal, complete with cost analyses, projected outcomes, and a timeline. Lauren felt her pulse quicken. 2 weeks. That was no time at all to refine everything. Yet she also sensed an underlying excitement. If they could pull this off, she might not only help countless families, but also secure a more stable financial future for herself and her father. Fighting her weariness, she planted herself at the dining table and began typing out bullet points. She remembered the father who saved his choking daughter at one of her workshops, the volunteer who handled minor burns during a small fire. Those stories would form the heart of her pitch. The corporate crowd might crave numbers, but she refused to forget the lives behind the data. And so, between sips of microwaved coffee, she crafted a vision she hoped would transcend business jargon and capture the essence of what it meant to equip everyday citizens with life-saving skills. Though the journey had only begun, Lauren sensed her adaptation to this new realm accelerating, her heart aligned with a cause far greater than she had ever imagined possible. Lauren soon discovered that in this corporate environment, allies could emerge from unexpected corners. Early one morning, she stepped off the elevator at the Foundation's office to find Tom Reynolds standing by the reception desk, an affable smile on his face. A bespectacled man of about 40, Tom was the head of the IT department and had grown up in a rough Detroit neighborhood. Robert had mentioned Tom in passing, hinting that he might be a good contact. Lauren approached, extending her hand. "Tom Reynolds, I'm Lauren Chen." "Nice to meet you," he said, returning a firm handshake. "I've heard you're shaking things up around here. About time we had someone focusing on practical community work." She smiled sheepishly. I wouldn't say I'm shaking things up just yet, but I'm trying. How did you end up at the foundation? Robert hired me after I spearheaded a digital literacy program in Detroit. He likes people who think outside the box, Tom explained. I've been hearing whispers about your first aid training initiative. Sounds promising. They walked to the break room for coffee, where Tom spoke more freely. A lot of folks here have big hearts, but some are stuck in the usual mold. Impressive buildings, big-name research. If you can show them how real people's lives can be changed with simple, hands-on training, you'll grab attention. She exhaled, relieved. I'm thankful to hear that. Any idea how I might better frame my pitch? Tom gave it some thought. Focus on stories and data. Both. Board members love personal impact stories, but they also need to see metrics. Talk about how many can be trained per year, potential community health outcomes, maybe even healthcare cost savings in the long run. Before Lauren could respond, Mary Sullivan, a 50-year-old nurse who worked closely with the Foundation's existing medical programs, popped her head in. I heard my name, she teased, stepping fully into the room. Her warm smile reached her eyes, revealing laugh lines that suggested years of dedication in patient care. Lauren introduced herself, remembering Robert's advice that Mary was another potential supporter. I understand you oversee some of the Foundation's nursing partnerships. Mary nodded, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Yes, we fund nursing scholarships, hospital expansions, that kind of thing. But I've always felt we needed to do more in the realm of preventive care and education. Robert mentioned you're pushing that angle now, right? Lauren's shoulders relaxed as she realized these two were exactly the sort of allies she needed. She explained her plan in more detail, the training modules, how sessions would be run, even the target communities she'd identified. Mary listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. And you'd want to integrate nurses or paramedics as trainers, I assume, she said at one point. Because we already have a network of healthcare professionals who might volunteer if the Foundation organizes it. That would be perfect, Lauren replied, excitement creeping into her voice. The more qualified trainers we have, the more widespread these sessions can become. Tom jumped in, eyes lighting up. We could also develop an online portal, an easy place for people to sign up, track who's been trained, measure results, gather testimonials. Lauren smiled. That sounds amazing. I need to put all this in the proposal I'm presenting soon to the board. Mary exchanged a glance with Tom, then patted Lauren's arm. Count us in to help. The Foundation can be a maze, but we'll guide you through it. That afternoon, Lauren returned to her desk, an improvised cubicle the Foundation had provided temporarily, feeling buoyed by newfound camaraderie. She spent hours consolidating all the input she'd gathered, mapping out a pilot program that would launch first in Boston and possibly expand to Detroit, given Tom's local connections. Toward the end of the day, she had a quick call with Michelle, updating her on the progress. I actually found people who believe in what I'm doing, Lauren said, an uncharacteristic breathlessness in her voice. It's like finally meeting folks who speak the same language, even though we come from different backgrounds. That's wonderful, Michelle replied. I'm proud of you, Lauren. Just don't forget to sleep every once in a while. Lauren laughed softly, realizing how energized she felt despite her fatigue. True, she was juggling more responsibilities than ever, but for the first time, she saw a clear path forward, a team forming around her that could make her vision a reality. As she packed up to leave the office, she paused to reflect on how surreal it was, working in a corporate foundation by day and still racing ambulances by night. The ordinary world of paramedic calls now intertwined with this special world of boardrooms and planning sessions. Yet in both spheres, the underlying goal was the same, helping people in moments of crisis. Her final glance around the office lingered on Tom's corner desk and Mary's nursing charts pinned to a bulletin board. She couldn't help but smile. Allies, real allies, had materialized, reinforcing her belief that she wasn't fighting an uphill battle alone, and that conviction fueled her next steps with fresh determination. Lauren woke early the next day, her mind buzzing with the need to finalize her presentation draft for the upcoming board meeting. She arrived at the Foundation's office with a determined stride, balancing a coffee and a folder stuffed with notes. In the elevator, her stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Just as she settled at her makeshift desk, Oliver Barnes appeared. His crisp grey suit and meticulously combed hair gave him an air of authority that was difficult to ignore. He gestured for her to follow him into a small conference room. "Let's discuss your pitch," he said, voice devoid of his usual pleasantries. Inside, he flicked on the overhead screen. "I've seen your outline," he began. "You have passion, no doubt, and you've collected some compelling stories. But the cost analysis is too vague. Also, your timelines are optimistic. We need more realistic milestones." Lauren felt her throat tighten. "I understand. I'm learning as I go. But Mary and Tom have given me some estimates." Oliver cut in. "I know, and I appreciate their input. However, the board won't invest based on enthusiasm alone. We need a professional-level proposal. You're aiming to impress some very shrewd people with decades of experience in major philanthropic projects." She swallowed, bracing herself. "I see. I'll do whatever it takes to refine it. Could you guide me on where specifically to add detail?" He tapped the screen, pulling up the sections he found lacking. "Training staff, volunteer recruitment, city-by-city rollout, these need more robust data. And about your father's health situation." His voice trailed off awkwardly. Lauren's eyes narrowed. "What about my father's situation?" Oliver cleared his throat. "Word travels fast here. Some board members might question if your personal circumstances could distract you from leading a nationwide program. They need assurance that you can commit fully." A flash of anger rose in Lauren's chest. She forced herself to keep calm. "My father's illness is why I believe in healthcare accessibility so strongly. Yes, it's a burden, but it's also my biggest motivation." Oliver raised a placating hand. "I'm not judging you. I'm only stating potential concerns. The board can be blunt. They'll ask these questions, so be prepared." Tension crackled in the air. This was her first major conflict with the corporate environment, a realm where her personal life was fair game for scrutiny. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. "Thank you for the warning. I'll be ready." When Oliver left, Lauren stood alone in the conference room, heart pounding. She glanced at the large window overlooking the city skyline. The view was impressive, a reminder of the power and reach the Foundation held. But that power came with strings, and she could feel them tugging at every part of her life. She refocused, returning to her desk to dive into data. She knew Tom and Mary would help refine the cost projections, and perhaps Caroline could offer advice on managing delicate questions about her personal life. Halfway through the day, she caught sight of Robert strolling into the hallway, still moving a bit carefully post-recovery. Determined to secure his insight, she approached him. He smiled in welcome. "Lauren, how goes the battle?" She managed a wry grin. "I've got some bruises from Oliver's feedback, but I'm still standing." Robert nodded knowingly. "Oliver's detail-oriented, and that can feel like an onslaught. But trust me, it's for the best. By the time you face the board, you'll have answers for every concern." He guided her to a nearby lounge area where they sat. Lauren explained her worries about the board's perception of her father's illness. Robert's expression turned serious. "I won't lie. Some board members can be ruthless, but never apologize for your personal motivations. If anything, it humanizes you. Show them you can juggle both responsibilities. Turn that doubt into a testament to your resilience. His words calmed the roiling storm in her mind. She thanked him softly, realizing how valuable his mentorship was. If Oliver was the harsh reality check, Robert was the steady hand, reminding her why this fight mattered. That evening, she left the office feeling a knot of anxiety but also a renewed sense of purpose. It dawned on her that this confrontation, Oliver's blunt criticisms and the board's looming questions, was only the first of many battles she'd face. The entire foundation wasn't going to roll out a red carpet and blindly embrace her vision. She would have to prove, time and again, that her program was worth their funding and trust. Standing by her car in the darkened parking lot, she gazed up at the illuminated office windows and thought about her father resting in the hospital. She vowed to protect him from the stress of her corporate struggles, even as it fueled her resolve. This was a turning point, a test of her fortitude and commitment. If she could hold her ground here, perhaps she truly belonged in this world that was so far removed from the life she'd always known. Lauren stood in a narrow corridor outside one of the Foundation's smaller conference rooms, leafing through her proposal notes. Her heart felt like it had been hammered all morning by the tension of pending meetings. The board was set to gather soon, but first, Oliver wanted her to test-run her updated presentation in front of a small panel of staff, including Mary, Tom, and Catherine, to gather last-minute feedback. She tried to steady herself, recalling Robert's advice, turn challenges into motivation. His presence in these halls, though still somewhat limited due to his health, gave her courage. She caught a glimpse of him down the hallway, deep in conversation with Caroline. He offered an encouraging nod, which she returned with a small smile before stepping into the room. Catherine was already seated, wearing a cordial expression. Mary sipped coffee in the corner, while Tom powered up the projector. Oliver stood near the head of the table, arms folded. Once Lauren entered, he beckoned her to begin. She cleared her throat and launched into her presentation, determined to speak with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. As slides flickered across the screen, she discussed the pilot program's scope. The first few neighborhoods would be in Boston, focusing on low-income districts with historically high response times for ambulances. She listed the kind of training sessions: CPR for adults and children, wound management, how to handle choking emergencies, and basic medical triage before help arrived. At intervals, she mentioned the transformations possible: a father saving a child, a neighbor helping an elderly resident, a simple skill bridging the gap between crisis and survival. Mary nodded appreciatively, clearly moved by the human angle. Tom pointed to potential digital platforms for registration and follow-ups, while Catherine inquired about marketing materials. But Oliver, keeping his critical stance, pressed deeper on the numbers. You're projecting that each workshop will train around 30 people, correct? And you plan to hold at least 2 workshops a month in each target neighborhood? Lauren consulted her notes. Yes. Our initial estimate suggests that with a small team of trainers, 1 lead instructor, a couple of assistants, we can manage that volume. How are you ensuring enough instructors? Oliver persisted. If you're pulling from volunteer paramedics or nurses, do you have a plan to replace them if they drop out? People's schedules can shift without warning. Lauren felt a flicker of anxiety. We're establishing a volunteer roster and also budgeting for a core group of paid trainers, she replied. The idea is to have a stable foundation of professionals who can commit long-term while also welcoming volunteers. Mary chimed in. We could rotate instructors from different hospitals. Many nurses are eager to volunteer. But yes, we should formalize a schedule to avoid gaps. Oliver drummed his fingers on the table, then glanced at Catherine. And from a PR standpoint, are we sure we can get the community to show up? A lot of philanthropic programs struggle with attendance once initial excitement fades. Before Lauren could reply, Tom jumped in. That's where local partnerships come in. Community centers, churches, libraries, they can help with outreach. We'll track sign-ups online and in person. If we combine that with consistent follow-ups, we'll stand a good chance of building momentum. Lauren nodded, relieved to have support. She reiterated that any pilot would include thorough record-keeping to prove effectiveness. That way, once the board saw concrete data, expansions to other cities would be more convincing. When the final slide disappeared from the screen, the room fell quiet. Lauren's cheeks felt warm under the fluorescent lights. Every question had forced her to refine her plan in real time. She waited, bracing herself for Oliver's verdict. "Overall," he said at last, "it's improved. The structure is clearer, and the cost breakdown is better than last time." He flicked his gaze to Mary and Tom. "I see collaboration here. Good. We'll still need more detail on the volunteer pipeline before the official board meeting, but this is promising." Lauren exhaled in relief. She searched for approval in Catherine's face, who gave a small smile. "I agree with Oliver," Catherine said, "and I'm thinking we can shape a public narrative around real-life success stories. People connect with that." Feeling lighter, Lauren gathered her notes. They spent another half-hour discussing final touches before Mary and Tom left to handle their own duties. Catherine departed soon after, leaving Lauren and Oliver alone in the room. He met her eyes, his tone softening. "I come down hard on you because I believe you've got a worthwhile idea, Lauren, but this foundation is used to large-scale projects with guaranteed outcomes. You're asking them to fund something intangible, human readiness. It's a harder sell, so your proposal must be ironclad." She nodded slowly. "Thank you, really. I appreciate your candor." Oliver offered a curt nod and turned to go. Lauren lingered by the projector, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. This rehearsal had been one of many tests, each shaping her proposal into something stronger. And though she felt the pressure mounting, she also sensed herself growing more certain that this was the path she was meant to walk. The next day, Lauren walked into her apartment and realized how little time she'd spent there lately. The blinds were still drawn, dust lightly coated the coffee table, and unopened mail had accumulated by the door. The short break in her schedule felt foreign, and she found herself unusually restless. She sank into the couch, phone in hand, debating whether to call her father. A wave of guilt washed over her. She'd visited him less frequently since juggling foundation duties with her paramedic shifts. Each time she did see him, his persistent fatigue reminded her that time was precious. Yet she also knew she had to push forward for his sake as much as anyone else's. Unable to shake her unease, she dialed the hospital's number. After a few rings, George Chen's weary voice filled her ear. "Lauren, sweetheart, everything okay?" She closed her eyes, letting the soft rasp of his tone both comfort and sadden her. "I'm all right, Dad. How are you feeling?" "Still kicking," he said with gentle humor. "Had another scan today. The doctors are analyzing it, but I won't get results until tomorrow." "How's your project?" She hesitated, remembering Oliver's intense questioning and the board's looming judgment. "It's good. Stressful, but good. We're nearly ready to present it to the board. They'll decide if it's worth investing in." George gave a thoughtful hum. "When you were small, you used to hide behind me whenever you felt scared, remember? But now I see you facing the world on your own." A surge of emotion welled up in Lauren's throat. "I wouldn't say on my own. Without your support, I'd probably still be second-guessing every decision." He chuckled softly. "Just make sure you take care of yourself. Even paramedics need rest." After hanging up, Lauren gazed at the muted glow of her TV, which she hadn't turned on in days. The apartment felt oddly cold. She thought about the demands from Oliver, the encouragement from Robert, the quiet solidarity of Mary and Tom, and the distant but critical eyes of the board. Then her mind lingered on her father's health, reminding her why she couldn't back down. A knock at the door jolted her. She opened it to find Michelle, armed with a bag of groceries. "I figured you might not be feeding yourself properly," her friend said, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. Lauren managed a small laugh. "You know me too well. I was just about to see if there was anything edible left in the fridge." Michelle deposited the groceries on the kitchen counter. "I grabbed some frozen lasagna, fruit, and stuff for breakfast. How are you, really?" They moved to the living room, each taking a worn seat on the couch. Lauren sighed. "I'm stressed. The closer we get to this presentation, the more I doubt myself. What if they reject the proposal? Or what if they accept and I can't deliver?" Michelle listened quietly, giving Lauren space to vent. "You're juggling more pressure than anyone I know, aside from maybe the fire chief, but you've always risen to challenges. Remember how you managed your EMT classes while working part-time and taking care of your dad right after your mom passed? You pulled that off when most people would have crumbled." Lauren's eyes misted at the memory. "That was tough, but I had you and Dad then too. You still have us," Michelle reminded. "Plus, you've got Robert backing you, Mary and Tom in your corner, even Oliver pushing you to be your best." Lauren inhaled shakily, a knot of tension in her chest unraveling. "I just keep replaying everything, and with Dad's condition, it feels like I'm gambling precious time." Michelle scooted closer and wrapped an arm around Lauren's shoulders. "He wants you to succeed, Lauren. I can see it in his eyes whenever I visit him at the hospital. He might not be as vocal about it, but you're giving him hope too, in your own way." They sat in silence for a moment, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside. Eventually, Michelle declared she would heat up the lasagna, and Lauren nodded gratefully. While her friend bustled in the kitchen, Lauren thought about how easily her father could have become another statistic if she'd not had the knowledge and resources to fight for him. That same knowledge, basic, practical, life-saving, was what she hoped to spread across the country. She rubbed her eyes, feeling a blend of desperation and determination. This was the crux of her internal conflict, battling self-doubt and exhaustion on one side, fueled by love and moral purpose on the other. No matter how uncertain she felt, she knew she couldn't quit. Too many people, her father included, depended on her resolve. When Michelle emerged, the aroma of hot food filled the air, banishing the apartment's chill. Lauren forced a smile, thanking her. As they ate together, she felt a gentle wave of reassurance. Maybe her burdens were immense, but so was her resolve, and she intended to keep pushing forward, no matter how many obstacles lay ahead in the weeks to come. Lauren arrived at the Foundation's auditorium with a neatly pressed blouse and clammy hands. The board had chosen this larger venue for the presentation, an imposing space typically used for donor galas and high-profile gatherings. It could seat 100, but today it hosted fewer than 20 people, the entire board, plus a handful of senior staff. The emptiness of the seats added to Lauren's apprehension, making her feel even more exposed. Robert greeted her at the entrance, leaning on a cane for extra stability. His eyes were warm. "You've got this. Just remember why you're doing it." She nodded, heart pounding. Her carefully prepared slides were loaded onto a laptop at the front of the room. Tom and Mary offered encouraging smiles from their seats, while Oliver stood near a podium, flipping through a folder. She took a deep breath, stepping up as Catherine dimmed the lights for the presentation. Her voice initially wavered, but she found her rhythm, guiding the audience through the pilot program's methodology. She outlined community partnerships, volunteer structures, and the phased approach. Crisp visuals showed neighborhoods identified in Boston for immediate rollout, plus a second city, Detroit, influenced by Tom's connections, to demonstrate scalability. For a moment, everything flowed perfectly. She presented graphs showing potential impact on emergency response times, referencing established studies correlating first aid training with reduced mortality rates. She shared short clips, video testimonials from people who had attended her small-scale workshops. A father recounted saving his daughter from choking, tears in his eyes. An elderly woman described how a neighbor stopped her bleeding from a kitchen accident. The personal stories resonated visibly with some board members, who nodded in sympathy. Yet, as she neared the conclusion, something in the crowd shifted. A woman in a tailored suit with a severe haircut, Marjorie Sinclair, a prominent board member known for her outspoken views, raised a hand. "I see the emotional angle," dismissed Chen. However, the philanthropic sector is inundated with feel-good proposals. The question is, does this program truly justify large-scale investment from the Callahan Foundation? Lauren swallowed. "We believe the ripple effect, spreading basic emergency skills, has immense societal value. Even if it doesn't produce immediate ROI in the traditional sense, the long-term benefits could be enormous. Fewer fatalities, fewer hospital visits in the long run." Marjorie narrowed her gaze. "That's speculative. The data is promising but not definitive. Couldn't the Foundation's funds be better allocated to advanced medical research or high-tech equipment that benefits entire cities at once?" A hush fell. Lauren glanced at Robert, who offered a subtle nod, urging her to continue. "Respectfully, Ms. Sinclair, advanced research is vital, but it doesn't negate the need for grassroots readiness. If a bystander can intervene within the first few minutes of a crisis, that often makes the difference between life and death. Research doesn't help a child choking right now." Marjorie's lips pressed into a thin line, and another board member chimed in. "I understand that viewpoint, but we must weigh it against the prestige factor. Our donors often look for recognizable projects with measurable outcomes. A training program might not attract the same level of interest." Lauren felt frustration simmering. She fought to stay calm and remind herself these were genuine concerns. "I hear you, but with robust documentation and testimonials, we could demonstrate real, quantifiable impact. Families saved, success stories covered by local media. It might not be as flashy as a new research lab, but it offers direct human connection, which can also be compelling to donors." Marjorie exchanged a glance with a few colleagues, then addressed Robert directly. "Mr. Callahan, we all respect your vision, but is this truly where you want to invest a significant portion of the Foundation's resources?" Robert E., who had listened quietly, straightened in his seat. "I do. This initiative aligns with our mission to improve medical accessibility. Not everyone can afford top-tier medical care. Equipping communities with basic skills is a step toward closing that gap." A murmur spread through the board. Some members appeared swayed by Robert's conviction. Others remained stony-faced, clearly unconvinced. Lauren's pulse quickened, recalling Oliver's warning that the board could be ruthless in its expectations. She realized she was standing on the edge of a daunting precipice. If the board didn't vote in favor, all her efforts might collapse. After a tense pause, Marjorie glanced around. "We should put this to a preliminary vote. If the majority is inclined to proceed, we'll formalize the funding allotment. If not, we reconsider." Lauren felt her mouth go dry. She forced herself to stay upright, feigning calm, as the board members quietly conferred. In those moments, each passing second seemed an eternity. She saw Mary biting her lip, Tom gripping the edge of his chair, Oliver's face unreadable, and Robert watching the group with steeled composure. The board concluded their hushed discussion, and Marjorie rose to announce their preliminary stance. Whatever followed would either catapult Lauren's dream forward or place an almost insurmountable obstacle in her path. A wave of silence engulfed the auditorium as Marjorie Sinclair addressed the group. "We've taken an initial poll. The board is not unanimously convinced, but a narrow majority is willing to grant a limited trial of Ms. Chen's training program. The budget will be smaller than requested and will require monthly progress reports." Relief and anxiety battled for dominance in Lauren's chest. A partial victory, better than an outright rejection, yet far from the unequivocal backing she had hoped for. She glanced at Robert, who offered a subtle nod of encouragement. Tom and Mary gave her relieved smiles. Even Oliver's posture relaxed a fraction, suggesting he considered this outcome a step in the right direction. "Thank you," Lauren said, voice trembling slightly. "I appreciate the opportunity. I promise I won't let you down." After the meeting adjourned, people began filtering out. Robert made his way to Lauren, cane tapping the floor in a soft rhythm. "We'll need to refine the scope a bit. They've approved less than we asked, so we'll focus on Boston for now, gauge results, and reassess in a few months." She forced a shaky smile, adrenaline still coursing through her. "It's something. At least we get to move forward." Oliver joined them, flipping through notes in his folder. "For the record, I think you did well. We'll just have to be strategic with how we use this initial funding." He cast a glance at Robert. "I'll coordinate with Caroline to set up a monthly reporting mechanism." Lauren felt a wave of gratitude and exhaustion. The board session had drained her emotionally. Yet, amid her weariness, she sensed a fragile optimism. She had inched closer to her goal, even if only by a fraction. Outside the auditorium, Mary and Tom caught up with her. Tom gave her a playful nudge on the shoulder. "Not bad, Ms. Presenter. You held your ground." Mary's expression showed empathy. "I know it's not the full approval you wanted, but it's enough to prove what we can do. If the pilot in Boston goes well, the board might loosen the purse strings." They parted ways, each heading back to their respective duties. Lauren wandered into the corridor, surprised to find tears welling in her eyes. She wasn't sure if they stemmed from relief or a lingering sense of how precarious this success felt. Catching her reflection in a glass wall, she saw a woman poised at the intersection of hope and uncertainty. She collected herself quickly, deciding she needed to share the news with someone who'd understand. Before heading to her paramedic shift, she drove straight to the hospital to see her father. The tension in her neck began to ease as she walked down the familiar corridors, greeted by the antiseptic smell that symbolized both her life's work and her greatest worry. George Chen, propped up by pillows, looked more drained than ever. His voice was thin when he welcomed her. "Lauren, you should be celebrating your board meeting success, not hanging around here." Her eyes widened. "You heard?" He patted the small TV remote on his bedside table. Local station ran a segment mentioning the Foundation's new community training initiative, with your name attached. They were short on details, but they said something about a vote. Lauren eased onto the chair beside him, taking his hand. "We got partial approval. Not the full package, but enough to start in Boston." George smiled faintly, though dark circles under his eyes revealed his fatigue. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." She exhaled, letting the tension slip away as she squeezed his hand gently. "I'm worried, Dad. You need more advanced treatments, and we barely have the budget to cover that. I was hoping for a bigger program right away, so I could supplement my income more quickly." He shook his head, face softening with paternal affection. "You've already done more than enough. Don't let my condition overshadow this milestone. You'll expand in time. For now, focus on making the pilot a triumph." She nodded, tears threatening to surface again. "I just want you to see all this happen. I want you to be proud." "I'm already proud." He squeezed her hand back. "And I'm not going anywhere just yet." Despite his reassuring words, Lauren sensed the fragility of his condition. She stayed a while, telling him about the board members, the doubts, the partial victory, until a nurse politely ushered her out so he could rest. Driving to the station afterward, she felt a tempered sense of accomplishment. The pilot project was real. She had an official budget, albeit smaller than needed, and a window of opportunity to prove her program's worth. Yet she knew the road ahead would be steep. The board would scrutinize every penny spent, every outcome reported. But as she neared the station's parking lot, a flicker of determination sparked within her once again. A partial victory was still a victory. She could work with constraints, adapt, and grow this initiative from the ground up. It might be slower than she'd hoped, but she'd already defied the odds to get this far. She stepped out of her car, glanced at the fading afternoon sky, and steeled herself to tackle the next phase, turning this pilot program into an undeniable success story. There would be little time to rest, but for now, she allowed herself one deep breath of gratitude before returning to the urgent world of sirens and stretchers. 2 weeks after the partial board approval, Lauren found herself at the first official community workshop, held in a modest gym attached to a local youth center in East Boston. Mary stood at a folding table, checking in attendees with a smile, while Tom fussed over a laptop displaying sign-up data. A few volunteer paramedics unboxed equipment, CPR dummies, bandages, practice kits, arranging them in neat rows on the floor. The turnout looked promising. About 30 people trickled in, ranging from teenage students to middle-aged parents. A couple of seniors hobbled on canes, determined to learn. As Lauren welcomed them, she remembered the feeling of her earliest grassroots sessions, except now she had a sliver of financial backing and a small team, not just herself. A local community leader, Ms. Johnson, approached with a beaming grin. "We're so glad the Callahan Foundation chose East Boston for your pilot. We've been short on medical resources here for years." Lauren felt a swell of pride, but also a hint of pressure. "We're happy to be here. We hope to make a real difference." She launched into the training, demonstrating basic CPR techniques, proper hand placement, the rhythm of chest compressions. Volunteers helped participants practice, each new learner discovering how to act effectively in an emergency. Voices buzzed with excitement and a tinge of nervousness. Occasionally, Mary reassured them that it was normal to feel anxious, but that with repetition, their confidence would grow. Halfway through the session, Tom joined Lauren at the side. "We've got a decent crowd, and I'm logging attendance and digital sign-ups. Everything's being tracked for the monthly report," Lauren nodded, scanning the room. She noticed a teen boy carefully following each CPR instruction while a group of older women observed, intrigued. That simple image encapsulated why she was here, bridging gaps in knowledge and giving people the power to save lives, no matter their age or background. Toward the end of the event, a flurry of chatter erupted as the crowd tried out a simulated emergency drill, guided by 2 paramedic volunteers. The scenario, a hypothetical neighbor collapsing from a heart attack. With some nervous laughter, participants took turns calling 911, performing chest compressions, and walking through the steps to keep a victim stable until help arrived. When it concluded, applause broke out. The shy teen boy gave a thumbs up, and Ms. Johnson clapped enthusiastically. Lauren thanked everyone for coming and invited them to future sessions. As people dispersed, Tom and Mary helped pack up equipment while summarizing data from the sign-in sheets. "I think it went well," Mary remarked, looking satisfied. "People left here feeling empowered." Tom nodded. "And we have tangible numbers, 32 attendees, plus 6 folks who observed but didn't sign up. That's a solid start." Yet, Beneath Lauren's contentment, an undercurrent of urgency lingered. She knew this was only the beginning, and the real test would come when monthly reports were due. Every workshop had to exceed expectations to sway the board into releasing more funds for expansion. She felt a stir of unease that one good event might not be enough. That evening, her worry deepened when she received an email from Oliver. Board members are requesting detailed cost breakdowns of these workshops, including staff hours and materials used. We must demonstrate efficient spending. The email ended with a reminder that some were already skeptical about the program's long-term sustainability. She sank into a chair at home, contemplating how to keep costs low without sacrificing quality. Volunteers were crucial, but they couldn't handle everything indefinitely. Paying a small professional staff might become necessary as they scaled up, and with each training session, new challenges arose: scheduling, equipment shortages, coordinating with local venues. Meanwhile, Robert's health still limited his direct involvement, though he often called to check on her progress. She felt the weight of representing not just herself, but also Robert's vision, especially as some board members seemed poised to pounce on any misstep. Still, as she reflected on the faces she'd seen at that workshop, the anxiety turning into relief as participants realized they could save a life, she felt an unwavering conviction. The pilot program might be underfunded, the board might be skeptical, and her father's health continued to cast a shadow, but she was more resolute than ever. She had stepped fully into the central trial of her journey, not only proving to the foundation that her idea worked, but also proving to herself that she could handle it all: her father's care, the paramedic duties, and this ambitious new role. She set aside Oliver's email for the moment, choosing instead to relive the success of the day's workshop. Tomorrow would bring fresh battles, more data entry, and likely more demands from the board. But for tonight, she allowed a flicker of satisfaction to wash over her, fortifying herself for the challenges yet to come. Lauren took a deep breath as she exited her car in front of the Callahan Foundation's imposing glass tower. The board had summoned her for a mid-pilot review, an unexpected meeting that carried an undercurrent of urgency. She clutched a folder full of charts, testimonials, and cost analyses, hoping the data would speak for itself. Inside, the corridor leading to the conference room buzzed with quiet tension. Caroline met her in the hallway, a worried crease forming between her brows. "Oliver just told me Marjorie Sinclair has been raising concerns about our budget usage. She wants to know if you're overspending on trainers and materials." Lauren nodded, heart pounding. "I've double-checked the numbers. We're within the agreed limits, especially with volunteer support. Are we sure she's not just trying to sabotage the program?" Caroline sighed, glancing around as if wary of eavesdroppers. "Marjorie likes big, prestigious projects that attract influential donors. She's never hidden her skepticism about smaller, community-oriented initiatives. But Robert insisted on giving you a fair shot. She'll have to listen to your progress before passing judgment." They parted ways, and Lauren stepped into the conference room to find the entire board assembled. Robert sat at the far end, leaning forward with a quiet presence that still commanded the room. Oliver was already there, standing near Marjorie, who wore a crisp navy suit and a faintly disapproving frown. Catherine and a few other members looked on with neutral expressions. Marjorie wasted no time. "Ms. Chen, this mid-pilot meeting is highly irregular, but certain figures caught my eye." She tapped a folder. "You proposed a modest budget, yet we see recurring expenses that weren't explicitly detailed. Please explain." Lauren's stomach twisted. She opened her own folder, revealing a series of expense breakdowns. These are ancillary costs, gas reimbursements for volunteers traveling to different neighborhoods, additional CPR mannequins after some older ones were deemed unusable, printed materials for communities without reliable internet access. Marjorie arched an eyebrow. And these extra sessions you organized last month, 2 in East Boston, 2 in the South End. That wasn't in the original timeline. Oliver stepped in, somewhat diplomatically. They were indeed additions, but each had strong attendance. I visited one session myself. The numbers were impressive. Marjorie's gaze shifted to Oliver, then back to Lauren. We authorized a small pilot, not an expansion. I'm concerned you're spreading yourself too thin. A scattered approach might reduce the program's overall impact. Lauren straightened her posture. On the contrary, each location has community leaders who want to replicate the training. Every new session gathers critical data on how best to scale the program. By proactively exploring more neighborhoods, we're learning what works and what doesn't, in diverse settings. Marjorie pursed her lips. Catherine cleared her throat gently. If I may, she said, looking around the table, the preliminary reports show strong community engagement. The intangible goodwill factor could benefit the Foundation's public image. We have local media coverage praising the workshops. Marjorie remained unconvinced. Goodwill doesn't pay the bills. Our donors expect tangible outcomes. Ms. Chen, can you assure us that these extra sessions won't derail the budget we initially set? Lauren inhaled sharply, reminding herself to stay calm. Yes. We're still under the total budget ceiling, largely thanks to volunteers and donated venues. Each session is tracked meticulously. I've prepared spreadsheets demonstrating all expenses. She handed out copies, watching Marjorie thumb through them with a scrutinizing eye. Robert finally spoke, voice steady. Marjorie, we must remember that innovation sometimes requires adaptive steps. If these workshops succeed, they'll show donors a new model of accessible healthcare support at the community level. A murmur rippled through the room. Marjorie looked ready to push back, but then Oliver, to Lauren's relief, highlighted a few numbers confirming that the program remained on track, financially speaking. The tension in the air gradually eased. I propose we allow Mrs. Chen to continue as planned, Oliver said. We'll review the final results at the pilot's conclusion. If performance meets our benchmarks, we move forward. If not, we re-evaluate. Marjorie let out a quiet exhale. All right. The Foundation's name is on this project, so we expect excellence. Ms. Chen, don't let us down. With that, she gathered her papers and rose, effectively ending the meeting. Lauren stood there, trying to steady her racing heart. As the board members filed out, Robert approached her, cane tapping softly against the polished floor. You handled that well, he said, voice low. Keep your focus. This is the kind of confrontation we expected when we brought you on. She nodded, relieved yet drained. I just hope my father's situation doesn't worsen. I'm juggling so much already. Robert placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Take it one step at a time. We'll handle the challenges as they come. Outside, Lauren allowed herself a brief moment of triumph. She had faced Marjorie's scrutiny directly and convinced the board, at least for now, that her approach was worth pursuing. But she couldn't ignore a nagging sense that this was just the opening salvo in a larger battle. The real test, she knew, would come with final results, and the health of the man who inspired her to keep going in the first place. That evening, Lauren found herself walking the corridors of Boston General Hospital, drawn by an instinctive need to visit her father after the tense board meeting. She felt every step echo in her tired body. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting stark shadows against white walls lined with posters about patient rights and health awareness. When she reached her father's room, she hesitated at the doorway, observing him through the small glass pane. George Chen lay propped up on pillows, nodding off to the drone of the TV. The chemo had thinned his once dark hair, now a soft white halo around his head. His frailty tugged at her heart. She knocked softly, rousing him. "Dad," "I didn't mean to wake you," she said, stepping in. He blinked, forming a warm smile when he realized it was her. "Lauren, sweetie, you should be resting. You look exhausted." His voice, though gentle, carried concern. She pulled a chair closer to his bedside. "I'm all right," she said. "Just had a big meeting at the foundation. Some board members are giving me pushback, but we're still on track for now." He listened intently, his gaze focused on her face. "You've always been persistent. Even when you were little, if you believed in something, you never backed down." A soft chuckle escaped him, but it transitioned into a mild cough. Lauren instinctively reached for a water cup on the tray table and handed it to him. "You okay?" He took a sip, nodding. "Just a nagging cough. Comes and goes. The doctor says it's side effects from treatment." She nodded, her chest tightening. She hated feeling helpless, watching him suffer while she built a program that could help countless strangers. "Dad, is there anything I can do? Anything at all?" George set the cup down. "You're doing it. The more you succeed, the more hope I have that people won't go through what I did, struggling with limited support, lacking the simplest tools for early detection and care. That keeps me going." They fell into a companionable silence. Lauren could hear the distant beep of monitors and soft footsteps of nurses in the hall. She reached into her bag, pulling out a notebook. On the front page, she had scribbled fresh ideas for workshop improvements, maybe adding a segment on recognizing stroke symptoms or distributing small first aid kits. "I'm still modifying the program," she said, flipping pages. "I want it to be the best it can be. If I can show real impact, like how many lives might be saved or hospital visits reduced, then the board can't ignore the results." Her father nodded, pride evident in his tired eyes. "That's my girl. Always aiming high. Just promise me you'll remember to breathe." A slight laugh escaped her. "That's Michelle's line too." "Smart friend," George said, his voice drifting as the fatigue clearly took hold. He squeezed her hand briefly, then settled back against the pillows. "Before you go, tell me about the people you've helped lately. Any memorable stories?" Lauren's eyes softened. She recounted a recent workshop where a grandfather realized he could help his grandchild during an asthma attack, or the single mother who learned how to apply pressure to a bleeding wound. "They leave these sessions feeling empowered," she told him. "It's like the fear of the unknown diminishes when you hand them basic knowledge." George let out a contented sigh, a hint of satisfaction crossing his face. "If I can see your program blossom before my time is up, I'll be a happy man." The statement hung in the air, weighty yet serene. She bit her lower lip, pushing back tears. "No talk of that, Dad. You're going to see this pilot through, maybe even the nationwide rollout." Yet deep down, a pang of doubt surfaced. She knew the odds, even if she refused to voice them. He only smiled, eyes drifting shut. In the hallway, a nurse gently signaled that visiting hours were nearly over. Lauren planted a soft kiss on her father's forehead and left quietly. All the way home, she wrestled with a mixture of hope and dread. Her father's spirit remained strong, but she recognized the toll the treatments took on his body. Still, his steady support emboldened her. She resolved to keep refining every aspect of the pilot, to fight board resistance, to gather more data, anything that might speed up the program's success. Later, at her apartment, she sat on the couch, the notebook open on her lap. She scribbled ideas under the lamp's dim glow, refusing to let fatigue break her stride. In the hush of that night, she made an unspoken promise. She would not only make this pilot succeed, but ensure her father lived to see its fruits. Though a quiet fear gnawed at her, she pressed onward, clinging to the steady reassurance of his belief in her cause. Lauren began to notice subtle shifts in her demeanor, especially whenever she interacted with the Foundation's staff. She used to feel overwhelmed by formal attire and corporate jargon, but now she found herself slipping comfortably into conversations about cost projections or marketing strategies. Even Oliver's critiques stung less, their barbs serving more as prompts to refine her work than threats to her confidence. One afternoon, she stood in a bright corridor discussing budget lines with Catherine and Tom. Catherine scrolled through figures on a tablet, while Tom spoke animatedly about new digital sign-up features for upcoming workshops. Lauren chimed in with an ease that surprised her. "If we batch buy CPR mannequins in bulk, we might secure a discount. That'll lower overhead for the next 6 months." Catherine arched an eyebrow in approval. "That's smart. Maybe we can channel those savings into an extra session or two in neighborhoods we haven't targeted yet." Tom nodded, a grin lighting up his face. "Absolutely. This is exactly what donors love to see, efficient resource allocation." Lauren felt a surge of pride. In these conversations, she no longer felt like the anxious outsider. She was beginning to see herself as a legitimate leader, someone who could bridge the worlds of emergency medicine and corporate philanthropy. It was a realization both thrilling and humbling. Her newfound confidence rippled into her paramedic work as well. One evening, after responding to a routine call, Captain Hughes pulled her aside. "Chen, you seem different lately," he observed, arms crossed over his uniform. "Not in a bad way. Just more self-assured." Lauren shrugged, trying to hide a smile. "I've been juggling so much at the foundation. Maybe it's forcing me to grow up fast." "Whatever it is, keep it up," he replied, giving her a rare grin. "We need strong heads out there." Yet, the transformation wasn't purely external. Lauren felt her own mindset shifting. Where once she'd second-guessed her place in the corporate sphere, she now accepted that her voice mattered. She recognized the depth of her experience, not just as a paramedic, but as someone who'd navigated life's harsh realities. This subtle shift seeped into her interactions with the board, making her more articulate and less apologetic about her vision. Late in the week, she met Mary in the Foundation's break room. It was one of those rare lulls when both had a moment to breathe. They settled into 2 chairs by the large window overlooking Boston's skyline. Mary sipped her tea. "I've been meaning to tell you, your last report to the board was great. You handled their questions like a pro." Lauren leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "Thanks. It feels like every day I'm climbing a new mountain. But I think I'm getting the hang of it." Mary studied her with kind eyes. "And how are things with your dad?" That question made Lauren's smile fade slightly. "He's stable, but tired. I can't shake the feeling that every day counts more than ever. I want him to see this project thrive, to know it's going to keep going long after he's—" Her voice broke off as she swallowed the lump in her throat. Mary placed a reassuring hand on Lauren's. "He sees what you're accomplishing, and from where I stand, it's pretty amazing." A moment of quiet understanding passed between them. Lauren cleared her throat, pushing away the sting of tears. "Thanks, Mary. That means a lot." Back at her desk, she busied herself with finalizing an expanded pilot schedule. The data from their initial workshops looked promising. Attendance was climbing, community feedback glowed. Participants were even writing small notes of thanks, some describing minor emergencies they'd managed due to the new training. Each anecdote fueled her determination to keep expanding. Caroline approached, handing her a piece of paper. "Incoming phone call request. A local reporter wants to interview you about the workshops." Lauren blinked. "Me? Shouldn't that be Robert or someone higher up?" Caroline shook her head with a gentle smile. "They asked specifically for you. Apparently, a few attendees from the pilot mentioned how hands-on and inspiring you were. The reporter wants your personal story, how you're bridging paramedic work and this new initiative." Lauren felt a momentary flutter of nerves. Media attention was a new frontier. All right, I'll do it. Just promise you'll review any quotes I give before it goes to print. Of course, Caroline assured. We'll handle all the formalities. You just focus on being authentic. Tell them why this matters to you. In that instant, Lauren recognized another dimension of her transformation. She was now the face of an idea bigger than herself. The pilot project, once a mere concept, was attracting real attention, and her role extended beyond the boardroom and the community centers. She would have to speak on behalf of everyone who believed that life-saving skills shouldn't be a luxury. Returning to her computer, she opened a blank document to jot down key points for the interview. She thought of her father, of the families she'd trained, and of the paramedic calls that had shaped her. The journey was far from over, but she sensed a new equilibrium forming, a steady confidence that came not from being certain of victory, but from believing wholeheartedly in the purpose behind it. The weeks blurred as Lauren prepared for the final weeks of the pilot. Each day brought a flurry of tasks, scheduling workshops, coordinating volunteers, compiling data for the board, and managing her shifts as a paramedic. She joked to Michelle that she'd forgotten what a full night's sleep felt like. Despite her exhaustion, the sense of momentum was exhilarating. Attendance at the workshops steadily increased. A few local news outlets ran short segments featuring interviews with Lauren and footage of neighbors learning CPR. A journalist even snapped a photo of her demonstrating the Heimlich maneuver on a plastic dummy, and the image circulated online, drawing more curiosity about the training sessions. Yet beneath the surface, Lauren knew challenges loomed. The board still viewed this as a trial run, and Marjorie Sinclair hadn't softened her scrutiny. Every expense needed justification. Every shift in the schedule required updated spreadsheets. At times, Lauren felt like she spent as many hours defending the project's finances as she did teaching life-saving skills. One afternoon, Robert called her to his office. She found him behind a massive wooden desk, looking tired but resolute. Papers lay in neat stacks in front of him, evidence, she guessed, of the Foundation's broader responsibilities. He gestured for her to sit. "How are you holding up?" he asked, tone gentle. She sank into the chair with a sigh. "Tired but determined. We're meeting our attendance targets, but the board is going to want solid proof of impact, lives saved, emergencies handled, before they commit to nationwide expansion." Robert leaned back, tapping a pen against a manila folder. "Yes, I've seen the latest reports. You're doing everything right. Now it's a matter of convincing certain skeptics. You know as well as I do that some people only believe in what they can see on a balance sheet." Lauren frowned slightly. "It's frustrating. People's lives shouldn't be reduced to numbers. But I also understand that's how these decisions get made. I'm trying to balance the data with the human stories." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You're growing into this role better than I anticipated. When I first invited you, I sensed potential, but I see now a leader, someone who can navigate both the paramedic world and corporate demands." Lauren felt warmth flood her cheeks. "I wouldn't have made it this far without your support, Robert. Truly." He dismissed the praise with a wave. "I'm just fulfilling my debt to you, saving my life, remember?" A hint of a smile curved his lips. But his eyes grew serious as he continued, "You might want to brace yourself for the final board meeting. Marjorie and her allies will push back hard if they sense any weaknesses." She squared her shoulders. "I'll be ready. I'm gathering every piece of positive feedback we've received. I'm also planning to invite a few of the workshop participants to share their experiences." "That's an excellent idea," Robert said. "You'll have my vote, Oliver's support, and possibly others who see value in this. Just be prepared for tough questions about long-term sustainability." Before she left, Robert rose from his chair to walk her to the door, leaning on his cane slightly. "How's your father?" he asked quietly. Lauren's expression tensed. "He's stable, but he's weaker than before. I'm doing my best to spend time with him, but these next weeks might be brutal." "The final presentation is a make-or-break situation," Robert nodded gravely. "You must do what you must. And if you need anything, additional resources, time off, just say the word." Her gratitude nearly overwhelmed her. "Thank you. I won't forget that." That evening, Lauren returned to her apartment, only to discover Michelle waiting at her door with takeout. "Surprise," her friend said cheerfully. "I figured you needed a decent meal tonight." They settled at Lauren's kitchen table, opening fragrant boxes of stir-fry and rice. Between bites, Michelle asked, "So, final push, huh? The last board meeting is next month, right?" Lauren nodded. "I'm already preparing. The pilot numbers look good, but I can't predict how the vote will go. Some board members want more prestige projects. They might use the smallest floor to kill our expansion." Michelle reached across the table, patting Lauren's hand. "You'll make it work. I've watched you handle crisis after crisis. You're unstoppable when you know lives are at stake." They chatted about scheduling volunteers and new training modules, but Lauren's thoughts inevitably circled back to her father. She wished she could freeze time to fully savor these moments of progress before she'd have to face an uncertain future. His health, the board's verdict, her own capacity to manage it all. Before Michelle left, she gave Lauren a tight hug. "You're doing an incredible thing. No matter what the board decides, remember that." Alone in the quiet of her apartment, Lauren carefully organized a stack of participant surveys and glowing testimonials. The shadow of doubt hovered. What if it wasn't enough? But with each signature from a community member expressing gratitude, she found another spark of resolve. She ran her fingers over the top sheet, where a participant had written, "Thanks for giving me confidence. I hope one day I can save a life the way you saved Mr. Callahan." Lauren felt tears prick her eyes as she realized how much the entire journey hinged on her steadfast belief that knowledge should be accessible to everyone, and she intended to prove that to the board, come what may. Lauren glanced at her reflection in the mirror, adjusting the collar of her blouse for the third time. This was the day, the last major presentation to the board before they decided whether to extend the program beyond Boston. She'd seen the schedule. Marjorie would be presiding, and nearly all the board's heavy hitters would be present, including some wealthy donors invited for a potential funding pitch. The tension running through her veins felt almost electric. Gathering her notes, she hailed a ride to the Foundation's main conference center, a modern building often used for large-scale events and galas. The sleek lobby was filled with neatly arranged chairs, a stage, and a podium under bright lights. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood. A projector screen displayed the Callahan Foundation logo above a subtitle reading, "Community First Aid Program, Pilot Results." Tom approached her first, carrying a laptop bag and wearing a reassuring grin. "We got the slideshow queued up. Mary's here too, and a few participants from the workshops have arrived to share their stories." Lauren nodded, nerves dancing in her stomach. "Let's hope their testimonies sway the skeptics." The room gradually filled with board members, Foundation employees, and a handful of local leaders. Lauren noticed Ms. Johnson from East Boston, the same community leader who'd hosted their pilot session. She caught Lauren's eye and mouthed, "Thank you," offering a thumbs up. Nearby, Oliver looked uncharacteristically calm, giving Lauren a curt nod. Even Marjorie managed a polite smile, though her eyes remained steely. Finally, Robert entered, leaning on his cane but moving with a dignified air. He shook hands with several donors before taking a seat in the front row, locking eyes with Lauren and offering a supportive incline of his head. When the lights dimmed for the presentation, Lauren's heart hammered against her ribs. She stepped onto the stage and, after a brief introduction by Oliver, began speaking. Slide after slide showcased the data. Rising attendance figures, the number of trained community members, feedback on how many emergencies were confidently managed with newly learned skills. The charts showed an upward trend, and the audience began to murmur with interest. Then, as planned, she invited a few attendees to the podium. A mother recounted how she performed CPR on a neighbor who collapsed before the ambulance arrived. An older man described treating his grandson's severe cut using techniques learned in Lauren's workshop. Ms. Johnson spoke passionately about how the training sessions empowered people in her neighborhood, dispelling their fear of medical emergencies. Warm applause followed each testimonial, stirring hope in Lauren's chest. She pressed on, concluding with a request for expanded funding and official integration into the Foundation's long-term strategy. As she finished, sweat dotted her brow, but her voice held firm. In a world where emergencies strike without warning, this program offers a lifeline to the everyday person. By scaling up, we won't just be saving random lives, we'll be transforming communities to care for one another. A pause stretched across the room. Marjorie, seated near the center, was first to respond, her tone measured. Ms. Chen, these results are encouraging. However, some of our largest donors seek prestige. How will we ensure ongoing interest in what is, frankly, a grassroots initiative that might lack the wow factor? Lauren inhaled. Respectfully, the wow factor is in every life saved and every community strengthened. If the Foundation markets these stories, like we've seen today, the public will understand that real change doesn't always require shiny buildings or cutting-edge tech. Sometimes it's about empowering citizens on the ground. A man in a tailored suit, one of the donors, raised a hand. What about sustainability? If you train thousands of people, how do you ensure they keep their skills fresh? Lauren nodded, flipping to a final slide. We propose regular refresher courses, an online portal for updates, and local community leaders who can host quarterly reviews. This keeps the network active and self-sustaining. A surge of confidence fueled her responses. She fielded a barrage of questions, from budget to training methodologies, leaning on Tom, Mary, and Oliver where necessary. Robert remained silent, letting her stand on her own, but his presence felt like a safety net nearby. When the last query died down, Marjorie turned to Robert. We've heard the pitch. Should we open the floor for a vote? Robert tapped his cane gently. Yes, let's put it to a formal board decision. If the majority favors expansion, we'll proceed with a scaled rollout. Lauren stood at the edge of the stage, heart pounding again. This was the decisive moment. She spotted Miss Johnson clasping her hands in silent prayer, and Tom giving her a discreet thumbs up. She caught Oliver's eye, and he offered the smallest encouraging smile. The tension was palpable as board members and donors conferred in low voices. No one seemed certain how the final tally would go. This was the apex of her journey so far, where her newly discovered leadership, her father's faith, and the community's hopes all converged. She took a steadying breath, waiting for the verdict that would either grant her program new life or condemn it to remain a brief, unrealized dream. The hush in the conference center deepened as Marjorie Sinclair tallied the final votes. A faint rustle of papers accompanied the momentous reveal. At the stage's edge, Lauren gripped the railing, barely breathing. Across the aisle, Robert Callahan rested both hands on his cane, his calm gaze fixed on the board. She caught sight of Michelle near the back, her eyes glistening with anticipation, and Oliver standing resolute beside Marjorie. Even though she felt a surge of hope, Lauren reminded herself that nothing was certain until she heard the count. Marjorie lifted her head, her expression neutral. By a majority decision, the board votes to continue and expand the community first aid program across additional regions. Her tone didn't convey enthusiasm, but the words themselves were enough. We'll release further funds, contingent upon quarterly performance reviews. A beat passed like a collective held breath, and then applause erupted. Ms. Johnson from East Boston clapped the loudest, tears welling in her eyes. Tom pumped a fist in the air, while Mary patted Lauren's shoulder in delight. Lauren's chest felt light, almost hollow with disbelief. After the grueling pilot phase, the countless nights of double shifts and data entry, they'd finally been given the green light. She caught Robert's eye. He inclined his head in quiet approval, and a tremor of relief swept through her. The crowd moved forward, some board members still looking reserved, others murmuring about next steps. Donors approached to shake hands, congratulating Lauren in a polite but curious way, as if they were re-evaluating her. Marjorie herself extended a hand, a faint smile softening her usual intensity. "I expect rigorous reporting," she said, her voice measured, "but I do appreciate the progress you've shown." Lauren nodded, still stunned by the adrenaline pounding in her veins. "Thank you. I won't let the foundation down." A swirl of conversations followed, plans for multi-city rollouts, discussions about hiring more instructors, scheduling bigger training events. Lauren managed to navigate the stream of questions with an odd sense of calm. She realized how much she'd grown into this role, comfortable speaking in metrics one minute and human stories the next. At one point, she glanced over at Robert, who had found a chair near the stage to rest. The lines of strain around his eyes hinted at the toll his recent health scare had taken, but he offered a warm smile that encouraged her to keep going. Eventually, as the room began to thin, Oliver guided her aside. "So, we have the board's support, at least for now. We need to scale up responsibly. Let's meet next week to finalize the budget for expansion." Lauren swallowed back a wave of gratitude. "Absolutely. I'll have the initial proposals ready." He gave her a brief nod before heading off to speak with another board member. Meanwhile, Tom and Mary flanked Lauren, their excitement barely contained. "This is huge," Tom said, still half disbelieving. "You did it, we did it," Mary agreed, her eyes shining. "We can help so many more people. Now we just need to be smart about the rollout. No more last-minute scrambling for resources, all right?" Lauren laughed, though her voice quivered with pent-up emotion. "I'll do my best." A short while later, the crowd dissipated. Caroline approached Lauren with a small smile. "There's a car waiting outside. Robert asked if you'd ride back to the foundation with him. He'd like a word." Lauren nodded and headed to the lobby, where Robert was already easing himself into the back seat of a sleek black sedan. She joined him, the door closing with a soft thump. Outside, the afternoon sun blazed over Boston's bustling streets. Inside, the air conditioning hummed softly. Robert settled his cane by his side. "Congratulations," he said, his voice tinted with genuine pride. "You've convinced some of the toughest board members I've known." Lauren folded her hands in her lap, still trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. It was a team effort. "Thank you for believing in me, for giving me a chance." He studied her thoughtfully. "Sometimes, near-death experiences clarify things. When I came to after my heart attack, I realized I'd been too focused on large-scale deals and prestige. Meeting you reminded me of my father's pharmacy, small, practical, essential. That's what true healthcare accessibility is about." A lump formed in Lauren's throat. She cast her gaze at the city blur outside the window, thinking of her own father in the hospital. "I just hope this project helps those who really need it," she said softly. "And I want my dad to see it succeed." Robert's hand found hers in a brief, supportive squeeze. You've accomplished so much already. Now let's lay the groundwork for a national rollout and take a moment to breathe. You've earned it. Lauren's lips curved into a grateful smile, her heart full but trembling with the strain of pent-up exhaustion and relief. As the car navigated Boston's busy avenues, she couldn't help but let her mind drift to her father's bedside. She resolved to share this victory with him tonight, hoping the good news might spark a bit of extra strength for them both. Lauren visited her father that evening, the echoes of the day's applause still bouncing around her mind. She found him sitting up in bed, reading a magazine, though she suspected he was more tired than he let on. The muted hospital lighting created a cocoon of quiet around them. When she recounted the board's decision, George Chen's eyes glowed with pride. "I knew you could do it, kiddo." His voice wavered, yet warmth filled each syllable. "You must feel like you're flying right now." She let out a breath that felt pent up for weeks. "I do. But there's also an odd calmness. The project got approved, so now I need to deliver. More training sessions, more data, more everything." He chuckled, adjusting his blanket. "Don't lose that fire, but promise me you'll also find time to live. I don't want to see you burn out again." "I'll try," she promised, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. She allowed herself a moment to observe him, his features drawn, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. She wanted him to be here for every milestone. Maybe the program's success would bring him some peace of mind. Later that night, she drove back to her apartment, a place she scarcely recognized from weeks of rushed mornings and late-night returns. The living room still bore half-empty boxes of workshop supplies, while the coffee table was strewn with a patchwork of foundation documents. She realized the life she'd known: early morning paramedic shifts, evenings with her father, occasional dinners with Michelle, had irrevocably changed. Though she was grateful, a pang of nostalgia for simpler days rippled through her. Settling onto the couch, she opened her laptop to finalize a few notes, only to stare at the screen without typing. The weight of her new role pressed down, a sense that the ordinary world she once occupied now bore a different hue. She thought about the paramedic calls she'd still manage, the training events that would multiply, the swirl of corporate demands. It was as though she'd stepped through a door she could never fully close. Michelle dropped by unexpectedly. Letting herself in with the spare key Lauren insisted she keep. She carried a paper bag of groceries. "I figured you might be celebrating, but I also guessed you forgot to buy milk again," she joked, entering the kitchen. Lauren smiled wearily. "You're not wrong. My fridge has become a graveyard of expired yogurt cups." Michelle emerged with 2 bottles of sparkling water, handing one to Lauren. They clinked them together as if they were champagne flutes. 2 expansions, saving lives and hopefully still having a social life. Lauren laughed, taking a sip. "Thank you for everything. I'm sorry I've been so absent. It's like I'm living 2 jobs full-time." "You are," Michelle confirmed, "but I see how much this means to you. And you look, I don't know, bigger. Not in a physical sense, just more confident, more certain." Lauren's cheeks warmed. "I feel it too. Sometimes I catch myself navigating foundation meetings without feeling out of place. It's surreal." Michelle sat beside her, glancing around at the clutter. "You know, it's okay to let go of some things. Maybe you don't need to keep every single stack of old brochures or every half-formed pilot plan. You're not the same paramedic who started this journey. It's all part of the process." The words struck Lauren, and she realized how tightly she clung to old routines and keepsakes, as though letting them go meant losing herself. Yet she saw the truth. She had transformed, and returning to her ordinary world no longer meant reverting to the woman she'd been before. It meant carrying the lessons, confidence, and clarity forward. After Michelle left, Lauren ventured into her bedroom closet, where she'd stored some of her earliest workshop materials: old banner signs, dog-eared pamphlets, a battered CPR dummy with duct-taped seams. Carefully, she selected the items she no longer needed or which were outmoded compared to the new foundation-backed resources. Placing them in a donation box, she felt a curious mix of nostalgia and release. The apartment seemed more spacious once she reorganized. A whisper of relief touched her, a testament to the idea that moving forward often means leaving certain relics behind. She might be the same person at her core, driven by empathy and a desire to save lives, but she now had the voice, allies, and resources to make a greater impact than she ever imagined. She settled on the couch again, gazing at the quiet night through the window. Though her ordinary world was forever altered, she felt a flutter of optimism. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she'd return to them as someone stronger, more focused, and ready to embrace the next stage of her remarkable journey. Lauren's first official day working part-time at the foundation, while still serving limited paramedic shifts, proved a whirlwind. By mid-morning, she stood before a small crowd of new trainers, mostly nurses and off-duty paramedics who volunteered. Mary and Tom flanked her, scanning the group with welcoming smiles. They were in a spacious training room the foundation had recently refurbished. Where boxes had once cluttered the floor, neat rows of chairs and simulation stations now awaited. A large poster on the wall read, "Knowledge Saves Lives, Community First Aid Program." Lauren cleared her throat. "I'm glad all of you are here. Our goal is to equip communities across several new cities. Each of you will lead sessions, manage local volunteers, and gather data for monthly reports. It's ambitious, but I believe we can do it." A murmur of excitement rippled through the group. One nurse, sporting a bright pink scrubs top, raised her hand. "Will we have enough resources? I remember in the pilot phase, we barely had enough mannequins." Tom grinned. "We've got you covered. The board released additional funds, and we've negotiated discounts for more equipment. Our IT team has also set up a portal so you can log attendance and success stories easily." Lauren felt a surge of gratitude for how far they'd come. In the pilot's early days, she'd scrounged for battered CPR dummies and begged for discounted venue space. Now, she had an entire fleet of professionals who believed in the cause. She nodded, scanning the group. "Let's walk through the curriculum updates." We added a segment on stroke identification and also improved the section on choking protocols for infants. Later, after a thorough briefing, the trainers practiced new modules, giving each other feedback. Lauren circulated the room, adjusting technique where needed, offering encouragement. She recalled how alone she once felt, teaching small sessions in community centers with barely a handful of participants. Now an entire team stood ready to replicate her model in more areas. The energy was palpable. By lunchtime, Mary called for a break, and Lauren stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. She strolled past the foundation's manicured lawns, passing a small bench. Feeling the warmth of the midday sun, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Catherine found her there a few minutes later. "I just heard from Robert," Catherine said, settling beside her on the bench. "He's impressed with your progress. He'd like to start scheduling visits to some of the new launch sites, Newark, Detroit, and maybe parts of Chicago." Lauren's eyes widened. "That's a lot. But I'm ready if the foundation is." She paused, glancing at a cluster of trees swaying in a gentle breeze. "How do you feel about the expansion? I know it's not the typical, flashy hospital wing or research lab." Catherine pressed her lips into a thoughtful smile. "I'll be honest, it's a shift for us, but I see how communities respond. There's a tangible warmth, a sense of empowerment. From a PR angle, it's pure gold if we handle it right. Real stories that donors and the public can connect with. Lauren chuckled softly. I'm learning that numbers are important, but stories can make people realize how a concept actually touches human lives. They returned inside, where Tom was helping a volunteer paramedic troubleshoot a login issue on the new online portal. Across the room, Mary was demonstrating infant CPR to a cluster of new trainers. The hum of conversation felt almost joyous. A gentle vibration in Lauren's pocket signaled a text. Her father had messaged, "Waiting for results of my latest tests. Docs say I might switch meds. Hope your day's going well. Proud of you." She stared at the screen, emotions colliding. Pride, worry, determination, her father's health, always a pressing concern, remained a reminder of why she fought so hard. She typed back quickly, "Call me soon. I'll come by tonight." Returning her focus to the training session, Lauren helped wrap up the final demonstration. When the group applauded the end of the session, she felt a pang of longing to be out in the field again, responding to 911 calls, feeling the rush of saving someone in real time. Yet, she recognized that her impact here was equally powerful. By coaching trainers who'd each teach dozens, maybe hundreds, her reach multiplied exponentially. Before the crowd dispersed, she urged them to stay connected. Check the portal weekly. Share success stories, like people who applied these skills in real emergencies. Our goal is not just to prove the program's value, but to remind ourselves why it matters. A paramedic in the back raised a hand. "I've got a friend in Arizona who wants to replicate something similar out there. Any chance we can expand west soon?" Lauren beamed, "One step at a time, but that's exactly the spirit we need. If we can establish strong models in the East and Midwest, the rest of the country is next." A few attendees cheered softly, buoying Lauren's resolve even more. As they filed out, chatting in excited voices, she realized just how far she had come from that uncertain paramedic who once juggled multiple shifts and lived in constant worry about her father's bills. Now, she was guiding an entire movement, one that might transform how ordinary citizens approach emergency care. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from her father read simply, "Tests done. Come see me." She felt her stomach twist in sudden anxiety, but she quickly reminded herself that the project was running smoothly, at least for the moment. She needed to be with him. Gathering her bag, she promised Mary and Tom she'd be back tomorrow, grateful that her new role allowed her the flexibility to care for her family as well as serve her cause. Lauren stood in the hospital corridor, staring at the digital sign outside her father's room. She'd been here countless times, yet something felt different. The test results her father awaited loomed like a silent presence. She inhaled deeply and stepped inside. George Chen looked up from a thick file of documents on his lap, which he swiftly closed. "There you are," he said, managing a small smile. "How was work?" She couldn't help but notice how pale he seemed, though his eyes still sparkled with that stubborn resilience she'd known all her life. "Busy," she replied, sinking into the chair by his bed. "But good busy. We launched an expanded trainer program today." His voice remained steady. "I'm so proud of you, Lauren. You've made something incredible here, something that will outlast any of us." She felt a prickle of tears, reminded of everything that had led them to this point. "Dad, what did the doctors say?" He opened the file, handing her a few pages. "My new scans show the chemo isn't as effective anymore. They want to try a different regimen. It might be harder on my body, but it could stall the cancer's progression if we're lucky." Lauren's fingers curled around the papers, her heart racing. "Dad, we'll do whatever it takes. If you need me to cut back on hours." George shook his head firmly. "No, this program matters too much, to too many people. And you have Robert, Mary, Tom, you've built a network to lean on. She swallowed the urge to argue. Okay, she said softly, but I'm here for you, no matter what. A nurse entered, politely asking for a moment to check George's vitals. Lauren stepped into the hallway, her emotions churning. She allowed herself only a brief moment of grief before mentally regrouping. She recalled Michelle's words about how strong she'd become and Robert's faith in her leadership. For her father's sake, she had to keep that strength close, both for the Foundation's expansion and for his battle against cancer. After the nurse left, she returned, giving George a gentle smile. I'm going to stay here tonight, if that's okay. I'll work remotely in the morning. He nodded, relief in his eyes. That's more than okay. The night wore on in subdued conversation, interspersed with George's dozing. Lauren quietly reviewed trainer feedback on her laptop, answering emails about scheduling and budget adjustments. She felt torn between her roles, the daughter nursing her father's hopes and the coordinator managing a program with national momentum. But something in her had shifted over the past weeks, where once she might have been paralyzed by the strain, now she found a steadfast calm. She recognized that caring for her father and guiding the program weren't opposing forces. They were parts of the same drive to uphold life and dignity. In the early morning, George stirred, wincing slightly as he tried to adjust his pillows. Lauren helped him sit up. Outside, the sky was tinted with pale pink. A hush enveloped the hospital corridor. "Dad," she ventured, "I want to organize a special workshop dedicated to you, maybe at one of the bigger launch events. We can show people how crucial these skills are by sharing our own story." His eyes watered, but he smiled. "I'd like that. Let folks know the difference one person's knowledge can make." Later that day, she left him with promises to return soon. The Foundation office bustled when she arrived. Caroline met her in the lobby with a wide grin. "We've got confirmations from 2 major donors who want to visit the training sites next month. They saw those local news pieces. Also, the City Council in Detroit is interested in hosting an official launch event." Lauren's heart pounded with cautious excitement. "That's fantastic," she said, following Caroline upstairs to check her schedule. A part of her wanted to phone her father immediately to share every positive development, but she also felt an ache, knowing how much energy it would take for him to endure the new treatments. By afternoon, she was on a conference call with Tom, Mary, and a group of volunteer leads from multiple states. Each had ideas for local expansions. Some wanted to incorporate high school health classes. Others suggested tie-ins with fire departments. The synergy was evident, and Lauren couldn't help but smile at the enthusiasm crackling through the speakerphone. When the call ended, she found herself staring at a large map pinned to the wall, each city marked with a small star where a workshop had taken place or was planned. She ran her fingers lightly across the surface, imagining all the families, children, and elderly residents who might gain life-saving skills. A soft tremor ran through her as the weight of it all settled in. So much responsibility, but also an immeasurable sense of purpose. Michelle burst into the room, waving a small envelope. "You got mail," she announced, handing it over. Inside was a handwritten note from a single mother in Boston, thanking Lauren for teaching her to handle choking emergencies. A month after the workshop, she'd saved her toddler who got a piece of candy lodged in his throat. Lauren's vision blurred with tears as she read the final line. "I hope your dad recovers soon. He raised a hero." The raw sincerity of those words struck deep, leaving her speechless. She hugged the note to her chest. She thought of her father, Robert's near-fatal heart attack in that cafe, and how it all spiraled into this massive endeavor. None of it had been planned, yet every piece felt destined. Quiet fulfillment spread through her, not a grand triumphant moment, but a deep, steady assurance that she was exactly where she needed to be. Outside the window, the city bustled in midday light, cars weaving through busy intersections, people hustling along sidewalks. Lauren exhaled, set down the note, and turned toward her colleagues, the map, and a future brimming with possibility. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.